Chapter 890. Liang officials, according to the law, below grade 3, were not only split into main and secondary grades, but also into upper and lower grades. For example, although they were both grade 4, there were actually 4 grades. Capital officials and local officials, main officials, secondary officials, and lower officials. There were many mysteries hidden within. To become an official, entering the lower grade was the first Dragon Gate. Regardless of whether one was a lower grade 9 official or not, the difference between the grades was like a chasm. The next grade 4 was the second Dragon Gate that was even harder to cross. Currently, most of the so-called nobles and ministers were above grade 4. To climb to this position, one had to rely on one's family background, luck, and ability. For example, the Song family's old and young masters, the father and son, had dominated the literary world for over 20 years. Among them, the young master was only a lower grade 3 Imperial College's right chancellor. Thus, even though Li Gongda was gentle and humble in front of Su Xiao, a sneeze from him in Lingzhou was enough to make those county governors tremble in fear. At this moment, Li Gongda still did not have the aura of a main grade 2 official. He nodded his head like a chicken pecking rice. Yes, that makes sense. Your Highness is a man of your words. So how can you go back on your words? If you want to blame someone, blame Uncle Li for not thinking it through. Currently, there are still Lingzhou Huangnam County's county governor and Fengyu County's county governor, both of which are suitable for Su Beiji. Fengyu County is the biggest county in Beiliang. It has a special rank and is comparable to a county governor. It is also not far from our Lingzhou city. Su Fengnian suddenly yawned and put down his wine cup. He stood up and said with a lazy expression, Huangnam County's county governor Song Yan is in his prime and has a good reputation. As for the county governor, although Fengyu County is the biggest county in Beiliang, it doesn't sound good. Forget it, it will be the new year in a few days. So Uncle Li doesn't need to worry about this. I'm just a general in Lingzhou. If I keep talking about Lingzhou's government affairs, I'm afraid that the next time I visit, Uncle Li won't let me eat and drink. Li Gongda slapped his thigh heavily. Su Xiao and Su Fengnian both stood up. He did not dare to sit there arrogantly, so he quickly stood up and said softly, Your Highness, since Su Beiji was Longqing County Governor Chao, why don't you let him be the Lingzhou County Governor? Su Fengnian smiled. Let's talk about it later. As an important advisor to the head of a province, when the provincial governor was patrolling the territory, he could bring his own horse and carriage to accompany him. That was why he was called Bi Wei. And it could be said that he lived up to his name. As long as the county governor did not make a big mistake, half of the officials would be able to successfully become the county governor. Liang had 30 provinces under the Taoism. As the county governor's candidate, county governor was also an important official with a lot of power. No one would look down on them. Su Beiji jumped from a county governor to a county governor, which was equivalent to easily crossing the second Dragon Gate in the officialdom. Even the entire Beiliang Taoism would have to raise their eyebrows. But what made Li Gongda uneasy was that His Royal Highness was still in low spirits. He looked absent-minded and easy to talk to, but this made Li Gongda, who had always been in control of the situation, feel uncertain. Su Xiao did not let Li Gongda see him off. The governor knew the essence of flattery, so he did not disturb the peace of father and son leaving the manor together. After Su Xiao went around the screen wall, he smiled. Is it your appetite or Su Beiji's appetite that is big? Is he eyeing the position of county governor that Li Gongda is unwilling to let go? Normally, Li Gongda would not be so reluctant, but now that there were less than 1,000 scholars pouring into Beiliang, most of them would stay in Lingzhou. There were many things that the governor could not say, but there were many things that were more convenient for the county governor to do. This is called a county official is not as good as the one in charge. Even if Li Gongda had not realized what was going on, with his eyesight, he would be able to quickly guess what you want. Father, let me say something more. Snakes have their ways, rats have their ways. In terms of military affairs in Beiliang, even if you make a fuss about a Huaihua general who has taken off his armor and returned to the fields, it is not a big deal. You can also be a Lingzhou general, but the circle of civil officials is big and small. They are all interconnected and even more intertwined. Just relying on fists cannot solve all the troublesome matters. This is also the root of why father has never liked to pay attention to local politics. Officialdom is Jianghu. Everyone has no choice. Officialdom is also not Jianghu. You can't just use force to convince people. Su Fengnian laughed softly. I know the severity of the matter. Actually, the governor of Huangnam County, Song Yen, is Li Gongda's favorite student. This official position is very sincere. If Su Beiji goes to Huangnan, even if Li Gongda's student does not support him, they will not cause trouble. However, Lingzhou is a joke. I know better than anyone that the governor is waiting for Hanlin to return home in glory. This position is simply tailor-made for my son. It is reasonable for him to become the county governor of Lingzhou in the future. If it were anyone else, even if it is Su Beiji who I think highly of, they are destined to not be successful. However, to be honest, whether Hanlin goes from joining the army to Lingzhou's deputy general and then to a general, or whether he goes down the path of a county magistrate instead of a county governor, I am happy to see it happen. No matter how unreasonable I am, how can I not have some selfishness towards Hanlin? Uncle Li, you are still a little petty. Su Xiao walked forward with a hunched back and smiled. The size of the situation is not fixed. After being promoted, one's field of vision will be broadened, which may be of help. However, it is still not as good as some people's natural situation. Li Gongda became the governor not because he is very capable, but because he is suitable for this position. Speaking of which, if Li Gongda was not petty, he would not be able to reach this step today. Speaking of this, father had to talk about his experience again. Many people might not be doing well at the moment, but you still have to be more patient. Not to mention others, just like father, he didn't have this kind of breadth of mind from the start. Before he joined the army, he was still fighting with the street thugs every day. After he became a lieutenant, he never thought that one day he would be on the same level as those high and mighty court elders. When he begged them for soldiers, horses, money, and provisions, he still didn't have much face left. The only thing he didn't do was kneel down. The hardships I faced, even when I left Liaodong with those old brothers, father has never said anything about it. Su Fengnian nodded. Su Xiao laughed without warning and said happily, "Just now, I saw you and Li Gongda arguing over there, drinking and scheming against each other. Just thinking about it makes me happy." Su Fengnian rolled his eyes and sighed. He said self-mockingly, "In the end, I still did not get the position of Lingzhou provincial governor. I was still worried about how to meet Su Beiji. Just now, I made a solemn vow and said bold words to this fellow. In the end, in the middle of winter, I turned around and poured a basin of cold water on my head." Su Xiao laughed even more happily. "Why don't father go to Su Beiji's place to support you?" Su Fengnian shook his head. "Forget it. You go back to Liangzhou first. I will definitely rush back to eat New Year's Eve dinner. After the New Year and before the military exam at the border, I will obediently be the Lingzhou general who scares people. When Lingzhou is over, I will return to Qingliang Mountain. It should not take long." Su Xiao nodded and walked out of the Li residence. Su Xiao said with a playful smile, "Because of you, Li Fuzhen, that girl, is hiding behind the projector wall. She doesn't even greet me when she sees me. Won't you turn around to take a look?" Su Fengnian did not turn around. He sent Su Xiao to the carriage outside the residence and glared at him. Yuan Zuozong was riding a horse to protect him. Su Fengnian looked up and said, "Second brother Yuan, don't let Su Xiao drink too much. If he really wants to, let him drink 1 cup at most." It was rare for Yuan Zuozong to have the leisure to joke with a straight face. Wakenmei smiled and looked at the carriage. "Father, who should I listen to?" The old man in the carriage laughed. "You will listen to him in the future." Chapter 891. As soon as Su Xiao left, the surplus generals and captains of Lingzhou gradually gathered outside a mansion and handed over their letters to the general's gatekeeper. Most of the letters were made of expensive materials and were written in gold. One could not expect these rough men from the general's family to have any lofty and ancient style. On this street, the governor's mansion had the highest threshold. Logically speaking, it should have the most visitors, but the Lingzhou general's new mansion was full of people, which made people gasp in amazement. Inside the mansion, Su Fengnian was chatting with Su Beiji. Unexpectedly, when Su Beiji heard that he could not get an official position on Li Gongda's side, not only did he not find it strange, he even said that this was reasonable. Su Fengnian could not tell whether this fellow was praising him for being slippery or mocking him for being a fox relying on the tiger's might to get things done. However, since Su Beiji was not in a rush to become an official of the provincial governor, Su Fengnian took advantage of the situation and waited for the news happily. The housekeeper of the mansion, Zhang Fulu, was an old member of the prince's mansion that had been transferred from Mount Qingliang to Lingzhou. He was middle-aged and had a dignified appearance. In the past, His Royal Highness had spent a lot of money to buy poetry and literature. The silver had all been handled by Zhang Fulu, so he was very reliable in his work. At this moment, he jogged to the door of the study with a face full of joy and reported to the heir about the bustle outside the mansion. He held a large bag of name cards and scraped off the gold powder on them. It was probably enough for him to go to Lingzhou's Tiger Hill restaurant to eat and drink. Su Fengnian waved his hand at Zhang Fulu and said, "Reject all of them. Just say that I won't see a single one of them." Zhang Fulu bowed and made a sound of acknowledgement. He did not have any doubts and went back the way he came. He said that the Lingzhou general would not be seeing any guests today and then directly closed the gate of the mansion. He did not even let the side gate go. It was clear that there was no room for negotiation, and this made everyone give up completely. These martial artists who were tyrannical in Lingzhou were not very dejected when the gate was closed. They had originally called their friends and came in groups to join in on the fun. Who would really hope that the Lingzhou general who had only been there for a few days would give them a promotion? In the end, it was the identity of Bailiang's heir that made them have no choice but to lower themselves and drink the northwest wind this time. Furthermore, there was an unwritten rule in Bailiang's officialdom. Yuzhou was mostly Yan Wenluan's while most of Lingzhou was Zhong Hongwu's private backyard. The two sides had never interfered with each other. This group of people were mostly the old subordinates of General Huaihua. Some of the direct subordinates who were deeply indebted to General Zhong were not even willing to show their faces. For example, a few captains with real power under the deputy general all gathered around the stove to boil wine. They secretly cussed that this heir was too vicious. He had just destroyed General Zhong's face and he actually did not want to stop while he was ahead. He swaggered into Lingzhou and stepped on the old general's face that had already fallen to the ground. There were no young people who were as unparticular as him. They were all filled with righteous indignation, fighting for the old general's justice. One or two captains with bad tempers immediately slammed the table and stood up. A few of the more shrewd ones also had a dark expression as they drank wine. If they were asked to rebel against the Su family, they would not dare to even if they had 100 guts. However, after being immersed in the officialdom for the past few years, they had learned a lot of tricks. They slacked off when they encountered something and were able to do it easily. Furthermore, not only were they a group of martial artists, everyone present was also related to the civil officials of Lingzhou's officialdom by marriage. These old foxes who sat behind the official's desk were well aware of the rules and regulations. They did not even need to say anything angrily for the Lingzhou officialdom to operate properly. Most importantly, no one could find fault with it. Didn't you scholars from other places come to Lingzhou to steal rice bowls? The hatred of stealing someone's official hat was far greater than the hatred of stealing someone's love. After these military officers discussed and weighed the pros and cons, they all left with sinister smiles on their faces. Bailiang had a small number of scholars, so most of them were officials from humble backgrounds. This group of people actually did not lack intelligence, naturally keen on currying favor. If the high officials could be said to be the awe-inspiring king of hell on the stage, then this group of people were the even more difficult to deal with little ghosts guarding the door. If some of these officials had brilliant methods, they could even make the officials into mere figureheads, controlling the officialdom, making their superiors become mere decorations. When Zhang Julu governed the imperial court, one of his policies was to target the shortcomings of the officials, directly viewing them as a disaster that harmed the country's throne. However, Grand Secretary Zhang was publicly acknowledged to be good at governing the country. But when it came to dealing with the officials, there was no improvement. There were also many important officials in the imperial court who criticized and ridiculed him. In particular, some of the pillars of the imperial court who came from humble backgrounds even chose to watch from the sidelines. If the imperial court, where scholars made up the majority, was still in such a state, Bailiang naturally would not be able to escape this fate. As a result, Lingzhou, which was right at the end of the year, was quickly thrown into chaos. Documents gradually piled up, gangs fought in the streets, criminals killed each other in prison, the granaries of the government either caught fire for no reason or became moldy by a few inches. All kinds of trivial matters sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. Forget about those county officials who were badly battered, afraid that they would not be able to have a peaceful year. Even the administrator Li Gongda began to feel tired dealing with it. Every day, there were lower-level officials who came to complain. On the contrary, Huangnam County seemed like a crane in a flock of chickens, its political affairs large and small orderly. Longqing County was the complete opposite, its situation especially miserable, leaking air from all directions. It was rumored that Governor Zhong Qingxin personally took care of everything, busying himself to the point where he lit a lantern every night, so worried that he already had a few strands of white hair. Lingzhou's officialdom was a mess. The front of the Lingzhou General's manor was deserted, matching the cold winter season. A carriage silently drove out of Lingzhou's capital and headed toward Huangnam County. The coachman wore a short jacket made of yellow wolf skin. The more burly he was, the more shabby he seemed. No one would believe that he was the deputy general of Lingzhou. In the carriage, other than Su Fengnian, there was also the servant girl Huyan Guanyin. These days, Su Fengnian had been reading through the records of Lingzhou's officials in detail. There were many red circles, and he did not pay much attention to this young girl who would have made it onto the rankings if she had come to Bailiang earlier. For this trip, when Su Fengnian crossed the threshold, he decided to have Zheng Fulu call her over to follow him out of the city. He did not know if it was because she was not acclimatized to the environment, but Huyan Guanyin was not as lively as she was when she was in a difficult situation on the grasslands. Her spirit was dim, and she was not as spirited as before. Su Fengnian thought that after returning to Lingzhou, if he had the chance, he would send her to a safe and quiet place. It was better than being sick and slowly destroyed in a noble residence. Some women were either held tightly in the palm of one's hand or truly treasured. Instead, it was a waste of natural resources. Originally, if Huyan Guanyin could adapt to Bailiang, Su Fengnian would not mind keeping her by his side. It did not matter if he ate her or not. Looking at her was pleasing to the eye and was good for the eyes. Su Fengnian was not idle during this trip. He had a document on the background of a few important officials in Huangnam County. These densely packed and delicate small regular script were the painstaking efforts of the second-class servant girls in Wutongan after working through the night. Su Fengnian, who had been with them for many years, could tell at a glance which was written by the green ants and which was written by the cucumbers. Su Fengnian rubbed the space between his eyebrows and put down the stack of letters. After going through it in his mind, he lifted the curtain. The unique cold air of the cold land hit him in the face. Su Fengnian did not put down the curtain for a long time. After leaving the city, Huyan Guanyin was a little sleepy. She curled up in the corner of the carriage, unable to endure the drowsiness. She was slightly dozing off. When the wind blew, she suddenly woke up. She quietly looked at the side of his face and bit her thin lips. Her lips were bright red and glistening, making people mistakenly think that if she bit a little harder, a few drops of blood would come out. Su Fengnian saw that she was not used to the cold and quickly put down the curtain. He smiled warmly and said, "I couldn't sleep last night, so I wandered around aimlessly. I saw a pot of impatiens by the window of your room. It's clearly past the flowering period, so how could it still bloom in such a cold weather?" Chapter 892. Huyan Guanyin blinked and said softly, "When I first entered the manor, I saw a few flowers in the corners of the manor. They didn't look like they were grown in the manor, so I gathered my courage and planted one in a small pot. I didn't know it was called a balsamine flower, nor did I know it was in bloom." Su Fengnian nodded and smiled. "It's the same as the shusher that's causing trouble for me in Bailiang. It's not a first-class product. But don't look at it just because it looks delicate. It can grow anywhere. A poor place like Bailiang is no exception. Some women who can't afford to buy rouge and face powder like to use its flower juice to paint their nails in summer and autumn. It's very eye-catching. Although this kind of thing has been criticized as a cheap product by famous scholars in Jiangnan who worship chrysanthemums and peonies, and has been given the harsh nickname of a chrysanthemum maid, I feel that regardless of whether or not she's a chrysanthemum maid, she can be used for people to admire and paint their nails. That's already the best use of her. There are a lot of them in my house. They grow all over the ground. Other famous flowers can't even be stopped by trees. However, I've never seen them bloom in winter. Presumably, it's because no one was willing to plant them in a pot and bring them back to the house that you accidentally delayed the flowering. That's right, this balsamine flower is very sturdy. My second sister gave it a nickname, hot-tempered. Under the scorching sun, when the wind blows, or when you pinch it with your fingernails, the seeds will bounce far away. When I was young, every time I made my second sister angry, she would give me a black face and not say a word for days. I always liked to use my hot-tempered nature to flick her face. I'd rather have her scold me than ignore me." In the end, Su Fengnian saw Huyan Guanyin staring straight at him. Su Fengnian said awkwardly, "You didn't do anything wrong. How could I bear to scold you? Besides, I have a lot of things on hand right now and am very frustrated. It's not that I don't want to pay attention to you. I do know how to write the 4 characters anger and introspection, and my handwriting is not much worse than that of a famous calligrapher. It's a pity that I haven't been good at it, and I often take my anger out on others. You haven't seen the scene of me getting angry with my father. When I was young and ignorant, as long as something didn't go my way, I would vent my anger on him. I could even take a broom and chase him for thousands of miles. But now that I think about it, even though I was childish, I didn't feel too guilty. Who asked him to be my father, the person closest to me? Right. Besides, at that time his legs were very nimble and he ran very fast. Everyone else respectfully called him the king of Baelyong and the great general, but I called him the runaway general. Huyen Guanyin looked at him and grinned. That smile was as innocent as a child's. Huyen Guanyin lowered her eyes, not meeting his gaze. Su Fengnian saw her cowering timidly and mocked himself. Did he look like a criminal with the word pervert engraved on his forehead? He remembered that her entire tribe on the grasslands treated him like an immortal. How could he reveal his true color so quickly? Su Fengnian collected his thoughts and lowered his head to continue picking up the letter on his knees. He quickly focused and gave Administrator Li a few days of time. It was probably because of the sudden wind and rain in Lingzhou's officialdom that Uncle Li was busy with government affairs and temporarily had no time to care about Su Beiji's promotion. Even though it was not to his liking, Su Fengnian was still willing to endure it. Back then, the Yan family had chosen a small path to escape Lingzhou. If he had not hinted to Su Xiao, Yan Jieshi might not have been able to leave Baelyong so smoothly. Su Fengnian warned himself not to be so soft-hearted in the future. Huangnam County was where Li Gongda had made his fortune. Even though Li Gongda's reputation as an official was not good, his ability to judge people was not small. It was natural for him to appoint people by favoritism. However, a few of his disciples were considered capable officials in Baelyong's officialdom. If it were not for these people helping Li Gongda gain face, Su Xiao would not have been so generous as to let Li Gongda become the administrator under one person just based on the relationship between the Li and Su families. The governor of Huangnam County, Song Yan, was one of the best. He did not have a prominent teacher and was self-taught. He was skilled in both magic and power. If it were not for the fact that he had many objections towards Su Xiao and could not help Li Gongda's other lackeys, he would not have stopped at being the governor of a county. This time, the reason why Li Gongda was so concerned and anxious was because Huangnam County was not normal. Normally, this would be a bright political achievement. However, with the new Lingzhou general in a quagmire, wouldn't Huangnam County become a dazzling bird out of the forest? His Royal Highness was not moving forward in the quagmire. What was going on with him, Song Yan, who was high up on a branch? Even if he did not make a sound, it would make people feel that he was being noisy. Li Gongda's heart ached for the Lingzhou provincial governor. He just had to act dumb. It was not a crime. He was just afraid that because of Huangnam County, he would be hated by His Royal Highness, who had walked in front of Baelyong for the first time. Su Fengnian let out a breath and narrowed his eyes in deep thought. If nothing unexpected happened, Song Yan must have received 1 or 2 well-meaning secret letters from the administrator, telling this disciple to quickly tarnish his reputation. The people under him were too good at conducting themselves. As officials, they did not even care about doing things. What a headache. Now, with Zhong Honggu as an example, no one would be stupid enough to go head-to-head with him, the Lingzhou general. As a result, they would all use soft methods to avoid the sharp edge, which would make people feel even more disgusted. Su Beiji was also not loyal. He did not get the Lingzhou provincial governor position and returned to Longqing Prefecture to watch the show. A copper coin that was no longer in circulation in the marketplace was slowly rolling between Su Fengnian's 5 fingers. Huyen Guanyin stared at the copper coin as it rolled back and forth, tediously, but she watched with great interest. It was to the point that when Su Fengnian raised his head to look at her, she did not notice. Su Fengnian put away the copper coin that the Crown Prince of Yanqi had returned to him and said softly, "Before New Year's Eve, I need to go back to Liangzhou. At that time, you can leave Lingzhou with me. Do you want to go back to the Beimang grasslands or go to Jiangnan to take a look?" Huyen Guanyin seemed to have realized something and asked, "With you?" Su Fengnian could not help but laugh. "Of course it's you alone. How can I leave?" She blinked her eyes and lowered her head again. Su Fengnian stretched out his finger and knocked her head. He laughed angrily. The entire officialdom in Lingzhou is working together to play dirty with me. What? Are you using what you have learned? Do you believe that I will chase you off the carriage? She raised her head. She was still silent. Su Fengnian had a flash of inspiration. He was stunned and asked softly, "You just want me to talk to you?" Huyen Guanin's beautiful face turned red. Su Fengnian held his stomach and laughed. He stretched out his hand and pinched her delicate cheeks. He then said helplessly, "Should I say that you are stupid or stupid? You are so quiet. Of course, I thought that you were not happy by my side. That's why I wanted you to go to a place where you can be happy. You have to know that on the grasslands, you dared to take the initiative to enter the tiger's mouth and ride on my body. Look at now, you are so lifeless." She was shy and wanted to say something. Su Fengnian sighed and let her sit sideways on his lap. He put one hand around her round shoulder and rested his chin on her head. He continued to flip through the letters. "This is called a saint's calmness. It is really unreasonable that I can't become a land immortal in this lifetime." The woman who was sitting sideways leaned forward, her chest squeezing one of his arms. Su Fengnian did not pay much attention to it at first. He only thought that she was uncomfortable. However, when his arm felt her restlessness, he quickly realized that it was not strange that he could not become a land immortal. Su Fengnian put the stack of letters on the ground. He only picked up one of them. His other hand slid into her collar. There was only a thin layer of satin between them. He held a ball of smooth fullness. His 5 fingers sank slightly. Huyen Guanin's head leaned back and rested on his arm that was holding the letter. Her charming eyes were like silk. She raised her head and looked at this guy. She was at a loss and faintly let out a delicate nasal sound. Su Fengnian's sanctimonious appearance made people's hair stand on end. He pretended to be calm. In order not to make a sound, the ignorant woman bit a slender finger. This natural charm was extremely alluring. Su Fengnian looked down and asked himself, "Why don't I stop thinking about becoming a land immortal today?" Chapter 893. The carriage slowly came to a stop. Su Fengnian let go of Huyen Guanin, who looked like she had been fished out of a water tank, and bent down to lift the curtain. He saw 3 riders stop by the side of the road. They did not wear any armor and were dressed in Zhonghu martial arts attire. They were very clean and neat. However, unlike Zhonghu martial artists, they all had a Bailiang saber at their waists. One of the young riders was particularly outstanding. His face was like jade, and there was a small but sturdy leather pouch hanging from the back of the horse. When Su Fengnian saw these familiar faces, he smiled and jumped off the carriage, stomping his feet. The weather was cold and the ground was frozen. The road was hard and the ground was hard. When the 3 riders saw His Royal Highness get off the carriage, they hurriedly flipped over and dismounted. Su Fengnian waved his hand, indicating that they did not need to bother with these complicated formalities. The 3 riders were all from the White Horse Righteous faction of the Phoenix Battalion. In Bailiang, they had vaguely become a small group of people with the most upright roots. Moreover, among the 3, Hong Shuwen had made a whole new level of respect during the battle at Iron Gate Pass. Wielding 2 sabers, he had killed 6 Imperial Guards and a Golden Saber Imperial bodyguard. The young rider, nicknamed His Royal Highness, was now Wang Zhi's deputy general. In name, he held the official title of Changshui Commandant. Last time, he had also shown his face at the Fish Dragon Gang in Longqing County. This time, he was transferred to the general's mansion in Lingzhou. Su Fengnian remembered that when he asked Wang Zhi for him, Wang Zhi's heart ached so much that he trembled. His expression was as if his parents had died. Su Fengnian asked Hong Shuwen for his warhorse. This Changshui commandant rode 1 horse with his fellow officers. 4 people, 3 riders, and 1 carriage, headed to Huangnam County. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "Hong Shuwen, did Ningamei teach you the short halberd?" Hong Shuwen, who always gave people the impression that he was a lone wolf in the desert, obediently held back a lot of his ruthlessness in front of His Royal Highness. He was actually a bit shy. He nodded and said, "General Ning said that I have some talent with the halberd. When I get used to the short halberd, he will teach me the big halberd." Su Fengnian didn't deliberately use words to win people over. After chatting for a while, he urged his horse forward. When it was close to noon, they arrived at a small border town in Huangnam County. They led the horse forward. There were many New Year's Eve markets in the town, where the people of the nearby villages came to buy New Year's goods. Some county officials took the opportunity to light candles and talk about good books, helping their parents to get closer to the people. However, the people of Baelyong were valiant, so they only treated this kind of thing as a lively joke. The actions of leaving the young and going to other provinces and counties to embellish the official's career were also quite solemn and respectful. Those who talked about good books had to wear plain clothes. In Baelyong, there were suspicions that they were neither donkeys nor horses. Many officers who knew a little bit of literature and ink went up to the stage, and even some military officers who liked to be in the limelight rolled up their sleeves and went up to shake their heads. At this moment, Su Fengnian stood and watched from afar. Even though the inarticulate officials on the stage repeated the same old tune, they still made mistakes in their sentences. Some children with good memories who had long since memorized the words by heart started to make a fuss. When the children started to make a fuss, many adults around them also started to make a fuss. The officials lost face, so they glared and pointed their fingers, catching a man and scolding him. The man wasn't afraid of this little official's prestige and loudly cursed back. Then the man's wife also looked at him coquettishly and teased him a few times. The small official wasn't really angry, so he didn't filter his mouth and took the opportunity to tease the plump woman. However, the woman of Baelyong wasn't a thin-skinned lamp. A few bold and vulgar words made the small official's face turn red. In this kind of inappropriate noise, the rigid and pedantic talk about good books became a joyous occasion. Chapter 894. Su Fengnian looked around and had Hong Shuwen find a restaurant, as long as it was clean. After lunch, they continued toward Huang Nam County. Su Fengnian had bought a large marten hat for Huyen Guanyin at the last minute. It covered her forehead, brows, and eyes so that her beauty would not be too shocking. The three retainers, who had infiltrated Baelyong's local officialdom after leaving the Phoenix Battalion, never looked sideways, especially Hong Shuwen. From beginning to end, it was as if Huyen Guanyin did not exist. Mounting their horses again, they turned from the bazaar onto a branch of a relay road. Other than the division of Baelyong's relay roads into provinces, counties, and counties on the surface, there were also a few hidden relay roads between many passes. Many of the seemingly cumbersome relay soldiers were supported with large amounts of money. If it were not for Baelyong's lack of financial resources, Su Xiao would have made a big move. At the insistence of Zhang Julu, the Liyang Imperial Court poured their taxes into the belly of the northern border. South of Jiangnan, most of the relay roads had been reduced to varying degrees. Regarding this, Zhang Julu sternly reprimanded a few local officials who were heading to the capital. After the incident, he changed his view slightly and immediately returned to normal. In addition, compared to the relay roads, Zhang Julu wanted to personally arrest the horse administration. The Grand Secretary did not have 3 heads and 6 arms, so he really did not have the energy to personally deal with the matters of the relay roads. Furthermore, the Gu Party had controlled the Ministry of War for a full 18 years. Not only did Zhang Julu meddle with the horse administration, he also directly took away the shockingly lucrative horse administration. The entire Ministry of War had long had complaints in their hearts. As a result, the popular palm eunuch Sun Tonglu had made a trip to Baelyong and returned to the capital to talk all night about the affairs of Baelyong that he had seen with his own eyes. After he mentioned the relay roads, the emperor sank into deep thought and speechlessness for a long time. Su Fengnian did not whip his horse to gallop quickly. Baelyong's relay roads were developed under the iron hooves of the Baymang war horses. It was a double-edged sword that could ensure that the troops, horses, and provisions could move quickly. At the same time, if the 350,000 border troops defeated the Baelyong cavalry, then they could cross the border in one spurt of energy. Without a doubt, the road to the south would be unimpeded. The reason the Zhao family had tolerated Su Xiao time and time again, even turning a blind eye to the salt and iron matter, and not making things too difficult for the water transport over the years, was not that they were not worried that Baelyong's door would open and bring disaster to the Central Plains. In the future, when Chen Jibao was in theft as a prince and entered Shu, it was also because they did not think that Su Fengnian would be in charge of Baelyong's armaments. The court had prepared for the worst. In case the Su family in Baelyong could not support the northwest of the Zhao family, at least there was Chen Jibao's Shu land as a second line of defense. When one reached the level of Su Xiao and Zhang Julu, conspiracies and machinations actually became meaningless. In the end, the one who had power still ruled the world. Su Fengnian waved his hand at Hong Shuwen and said, "Commandant Hong, today Baelyong has an abundance of meritorious and dishonorable officials. Not to mention lieutenants and commandants, there are even generals all over the streets. If I remember correctly, Bailiang and Liang share the same law. The civil and military official ranks and dishonorable official ranks add up to as many as 74 ranks. In addition to those scattered titles, there are simply too many to count. If one day I take back all of them, or eliminate most of them, tell me, what do you think will happen to Bailiang's officialdom? Hong Shuwen hesitated for a moment. Su Fengnian laughed and said, "There's no harm in saying it directly." Hong Shuwen said in a low voice, "Your Highness, then our Bailiang will really become a pot of porridge. If the people at the rear are not stable, those who work for the generals at the border will all have families to feed and will also not be at peace. For example, in Hong Shuwen's family, father was conferred the rank of a 6th-rank cloud cavalry officer because of his military exploits. Second uncle has some knowledge and was also conferred the rank of a 6th-rank Confucian scholar, which is considered not too common in Bailiang. These titles with ranks but no official rank are only used to give face to the elders and old brothers when they gather. If they really want to use these things to make a profit or to plunder the land, they can't do it even if they want to. If they were taken away all of a sudden, the old fellows' hearts would turn cold. Furthermore, it would be even worse than losing a few thousand taels of silver. Your Highness, I dare to speak from the bottom of my heart. This time, I heard from the elders in my family that a few thousand scholars from other places have come. They are all here to steal the old Bailiang's rice bowl. This time, when I went to the Lingzhou General's manor from Longqing County, I also heard a lot of rumors. They are all unfavorable to your Highness." Su Fengnian nodded and said with a smile, "Many people are working together to fan the flames of evil and make the stove that is Lingzhou's officialdom very warm. I'm afraid there are still a lot of people who are conscientiously adding firewood to the stove. This year's end in Bailiang is very different from previous years. It really isn't cold at all." Hong Shuwen was a bit puzzled. His Royal Highness could still smile? Because Hong Shuwen was His Highness' close official, the local prestige of the Hong family did not join the crowd this time. They closed their doors and refused to receive guests. They did not care about disputes and were already isolated and alienated by many families who were originally on good terms with them. If he wanted Hong Shuwen to go into battle to kill the enemy, he would definitely not hesitate. Hong Shuwen always felt that men should shed their blood on the battlefield. Before he became a general that brought glory to his ancestors, he had already thought about where he would die on the battlefield. However, if he wanted to criticize the current situation, it would really be asking for his life. Since His Highness asked about this foul and disgraceful matter, this ruthless Hong who once dared to slap his concubine mother half to death in the family could only say what he wanted to say. Su Fengnian slowly said, "Prescribing the right medicine for the right illness has a difference in urgency. Hong Shuwen, let me tell you something first. I plan to set up 14 rank 5 captains based on the geography of Bailiang. Captains are named after the important passes in the territory. If nothing goes wrong, there will only be 3 in Lingzhou. Wang Ji will go to the Maikong mountain pass that borders western Shu to guard Laziku. As for the other 2, one will be given to Han Lao's Han, who is temporarily the Deputy General of Lingzhou. The remaining one will be fought over by the entire Lingzhou. I don't believe that no smart people will take the bait for such a big piece of meat. As long as you become a captain, it means that you can stand out from the large group of captains who only deal with trivial matters. It would not be an exaggeration to call you a feudal lord. As long as someone is willing to lead an internal conflict, the following matters will be much easier to handle. Originally, I wanted to give Han Laoshan's position to you. However, you don't have much military achievements. After all, Han Lao's Han has Su Zhao's banner behind him. He can convince people wherever he goes, but you can't. Therefore, I will put you in the Lingzhou General's manor to accumulate experience. Although I can't use a quick and decisive method to deal with the Lingzhou officialdom, if I don't see blood at all, it won't make sense. When the time comes, I will need you. Bailiang's local captains don't have many chances to kill people, so don't treat it lightly. In the future, when I leave Lingzhou, you will most likely have to help the new provincial governor Su Beiji. I believe you know my relationship with provincial governor Su Beiji. I believe you know about my relationship with provincial governor Su. I'll say the ugly words first. If anything happens to him, you, Hong Shuwen, won't be able to compensate for that head on your shoulder." Hong Shuwen subconsciously wiped his neck and chuckled. "Anyway, I will do whatever your highness says without any objections. However, can I ask your highness for a favor?" Su Fengnian laughed and scolded. Why are you the same as Wang Ji? If you have something to say it quickly. Hong Shuwen said softly, Your Highness, in the future, if there is a war at the border, you can't forget about Hong Shuwen. Su Fengnian asked, 20 years ago, so many people joined the army because there was no peaceful life anywhere. They were all aiming for glory and wealth. If they took a gamble, they might be able to get an official position. However, it's different now. Why did you, Hong Shuwen, give up being a stable official and insist on risking your life at the border? Is it very impressive to have your head tied to your belt? Or do you think that you can't be a high-ranking official on the ground? As long as Hong Shuwen grinned, he was naturally sinister. Hong Shuwen is different from others. I just can't get used to living a leisurely and happy life. Especially after hanging out with your highness, I feel uncomfortable if I don't kill people for a day. I would go to the brothel to find soft and tender women to have fun with. After I'm satisfied, I would feel sick of it and couldn't help but want to break their necks. I don't think this illness can be cured, so I can only go to the border and kill people. Su Fengnian smiled and didn't comment. In a time of peace, the people slept. When they woke up, their homes were still there and people were still alive. They worked hard every day. If there were one or two good thoughts, then this was a good world. In the eyes of the people, Hong Shuwen was definitely not a good person. However, without people like Hong Shuwen and Li Hanlin, Bailiang's good world wouldn't last long. Chapter 895. Because this chapter has more than 6,000 words, it's a bit late. The next chapter is estimated to be around 7 in the morning. Huangnam County's Governor Song Yan's house was empty and sparse. There were few servants and it was cold and cheerless. In fact, this house was one of the top high-rise houses in Huangnam County. With Song Yan's family's wealth, it was impossible to live in it, let alone buy it. It was difficult to even rent it. However, because it was a haunted house that no one dared to take over, it fell into the hands of Song Yan, who had nothing to do with it. The previous head of the house was an old general who retired from the border and wanted to spend time with his grandchildren. He was the right-hand man of General Yan Wenluan. He was a meritorious general who could drink wine with the king of Bailiang when he was young. It was unknown why, on a snowy night, more than 70 people in the house were killed. Regardless of whether they were women or children, they were all beheaded. It was extremely tragic. Until now, it was still a big unsolved case on the streets of Bailiang. Some said that it was the work of Lulin bandits. Some said that it was the work of political opponents who still worked in the Bailiang Frontier Army. No matter what, the house, which was rumored to be empty every snowy night, was empty for many years. Later, Song Yan, who did not believe in ghosts and gods, became the head of Huangnam County. He did not do any water or land Taoist rites, nor did he set up any altars or rituals. He just moved into the house with his family and lived in peace these years. Although Song Yan admired the power of magic, he had another nickname that was related to Huang Lao, Kagan Taoist. The wife of the prefectural governor passed away early, leaving behind an unbetrothed only daughter called Song Huang Mei. In Huangnam County, she rode a horse and brandished her whip, carrying a saber and a bow. She was extremely valiant and formidable, not losing to the rangers of Bailiang. When Song Yan noticed that his daughter, who had always regarded applying rouge as the worst evil in the world, began to ask him for money, not to buy bows and arrows, but to secretly buy a lot of rouge and face powder. Song Yan had bumped into his daughter several times in the residence, but his daughter did not wipe her face clean. Song Yan was happy to see this, and he never exposed his daughter's clumsy cover-up. The library of the prefectural governor's residence was adjacent to the garden. Song Yan held a book and quietly stood by the window. In the garden, his daughter and 2 maidservants who were as close as sisters were laughing and talking happily. Her voice was particularly crisp. Song Yan, who was almost middle-aged, smiled slightly. His daughter deliberately spoke so loudly. Wasn't it to let the young man who had been standing outside the wall for more than an hour hear her? Song Yan had asked someone to investigate the young man's family background. He was born at the bottom of the market and was full of vigor. Therefore, he relied on a mediocre sect in Huangnan County. In several gang fights, he fought at the risk of his life and became the direct disciple of a sect leader. He had been honed in the ways of the world for many years and treated people better than those arrogant disciples in Huangnan County. Song Yan once visited the young man incognito in his spare time and drank tea with him at the same table. They chatted casually for a while. The young man rarely pretended to say something shocking. He talked in a simple manner and had a good nature. Therefore, Song Yen silently took a step back and let it be. Song Yen himself was not from an aristocratic family, and he was born in a poor alley. Therefore, he knew that it was not easy for a young man from a poor family to stand out. However, if this young man was a scholar, even if he had no hope of becoming an official, Song Yen would have invited him to the mansion and generously recognized him as his son-in-law. However, Song Yen did not think highly of this young man from a gang who licked blood on the blade. At most, he would not oppose it. It was too difficult for him, the governor of Huangnan County, to take the initiative to show his goodwill. Therefore, Song Yen did not think highly of this young man. Song Yen saw his daughter sneakily walk towards the wall of the courtyard, not forgetting to look around. It was clear that she was too thin-skinned and was afraid of being caught by her father. She also knew that her father was famous for his ability to see the big picture from small clues and was not easy to fool. Song Yen could only smile bitterly and retreat from the window to near the bookshelf. Song Yen placed the Taoist work, 5 Bugs, back to its original position on the bookshelf and sat back down on the mountain-like desk. There was a bronze incense burner on the desk that was used to burn incense to refresh the mind. Song Yen glanced at the 2 secret letters that had been sent from the administrator's residence one after another. His face was expressionless. He reached out and stroked the patterns on the bronze that implied exorcism. Song Yen closed his eyes and felt the burning sensation on his fingertips. He slowly withdrew his hand. He did not care about what his teacher, Li Gongda, had said in the letter. On the contrary, this amazing feat in Huangnam County was a sign that Song Yen was going to establish himself as a servant of the Li family. Following Li Gongda's high rise to 2nd rank, Song Yan's status also rose. However, 4th rank prefect was already the limit. Now that Bailiang had a change of dynasty, Song Yen knew that his impression of the king of Bailiang was very poor. If he did not do something now, he would not be able to advance in the officialdom for the next 10 or 20 years. One step late, one step late, one step late. Song Yen, who was in the prime of his life, was full of ambition. He did not want to follow behind others and eat the leftovers. However, right now, Song Yen was not sure if that Lingzhou general had the magnanimity to personally come and see him, this stubborn and smelly stone of officialdom, for his courage. Just as Song Yen was deep in thought, the sound of his daughter's shouts came from the garden outside the building. Song Yen helplessly stood up. This daughter of his did not have the slightest bit of femininity. How could she marry into a good family in the future? Song Yen did not respond. He walked down the stairs and took a detour to enter the garden through the back door. He saw that his teacher's daughter, Li Fuzhen, had actually rushed to Huangnam County. There was also an unfamiliar face beside her. With Song Yan's experience, he immediately guessed the identity of this person. It was the cold man that Li Fuzhen admired, Gua Fufeng. Song Yen did not have much of a good or bad impression of this person. Seeing his daughter, Song Huangmei, sizing up this man, Song Yen gave him a meaningful glance. Gua Fufeng, on the other hand, was very calm. He respectfully and reverently bowed deeply to Governor Song. Song Yen nodded with a smile and did not say anything. It could not be considered warm and polite. Even if this person became the administrator's son-in-law in the future, Song Yen still did not think highly of him. Furthermore, with Song Yan's status, even if Gua Fufeng rose step by step, if he wanted to stand side by side with Song Yen, it would take him at least 20 years of hard work. Li Fuzhen held on to Song Huangmei, who was a few years younger than her, but her expression was nervous. This was the first time she had brought Gua Fufeng to appear in front of her father's students. Others were fine, perhaps they would give her some face as the administrator's daughter, but Song Yen was known among the Li family's students for being unreasonable. He was very afraid that the governor would directly order them to leave with a straight face. This time, he had rushed to Huangnam County to meet Uncle Song in secret. Her father really had no choice. She did not know how Gua Fufeng had gotten the news and had talked to her for half a day, telling her many heartfelt good intentions. Only then did Li Fuzhen hesitantly bring him along to the Song Manor. She had a good relationship with Song Huangmei since they were young. She had always been treated as a younger sister by this girl. Everyone knew that Governor Song doted on his daughter, and this girl also had a dark relationship with a Jianghu boy whose background was even worse than Gua Fufeng's. This was also the key reason why Li Fuzhen dared to have Gua Fufeng formally reveal himself in Lingzhou's officialdom. However, thinking of this, Li Fuzhen had an indescribable sorrow that she had no one to talk to. When did she have to be so scheming? However, seeing that Uncle Song's expression was tranquil, and at the very least, he did not speak ill of Gua Fufeng, Li Fuzhen was slightly relieved. The heartless Song Huangmei did not know why the fearless sister Li's palms were sweaty. The group of people went inside the house to sit around the stove. Song Huangmei used the excuse that she needed to scoop some charcoal and ran out of the house like a wisp of smoke. How could Song Yen not know that she was going to say goodbye to her sweetheart? He could not help but make a commotion of folding a chair and standing on top of the wall. Song Yen had just sat down when he received a few name cards from the steward. They were all scholars from Huangnam County who came to ask for advice on how to help the people. In reality, they were just here to pay their respects to the prefect so that they could get familiar with him. Song Yen let the steward return the letters and also gave back a few books from the library. These people did not get to see the books, but they came in high spirits and returned in high spirits. It was not uncommon for them to show off to their peers. Song Yen casually dealt with this small matter and looked at Li Fuzhen with a smile. Uncle Song's salary has been used to buy books. The house is almost full. It will be difficult to eat fish and meat here. Li Fuzhen had never been good at socializing, so she just smiled. Gua Fufeng did not want to be a foil and took the initiative to say, the scholars of the past dynasties loved books as much as their lives. They believed that borrowing books was like borrowing a wife. It was better to directly give books to people, just like how a famous scholar gave a beautiful concubine. It was passed down as a beautiful story. The prefect is well versed in the Samadhi. Song Yen looked indifferent and turned a deaf ear. He did not agree. Gua Fufeng was thick-skinned and did not feel awkward at all. Li Fuzhen, who was slightly relieved, was a little restless again. She was afraid that Gua Fufeng did not know the rules and taboos of officialdom and would annoy the indifferent Song Yen. Fortunately, Song Huangmei brought a pot of black charcoal and helped her out. Song Huangmei spoke without restraint in her own home. She frowned and said, "Father, Taya just told me that there were a few outsiders on the street outside the wall. They have been patient for some time. What are they doing in the empty alley in the middle of winter? Could they be bad people?" Song Yen laughed softly and said, "The road is open to the sky. Even if father is the prefect, I can't control the footsteps of the pedestrians. Some people are willing to suffer the cold outside the wall. Even if they stay for a few hours, father can't use the official's hat on my head to chase them away." Song Huangmei understood the meaning in her father's words. Her face suddenly turned red and she lowered her head to fiddle with the charcoal fire. Chapter 896. The housekeeper stood at the door in a panic. Song Yen got up and walked out of the room. After hearing the news, he did not say anything. He turned around and told Li Fuzhen that he had some urgent business to attend to. He then asked Song Huangmei to help take care of the guests. After the governor left in a hurry, his footsteps gradually disappeared. Gua Fufeng lowered his head and reached out to warm the charcoal. His face was a bit gloomy. Gua Fufeng raised his head to look at Li Fuzhen and the governor's daughter, who each had their own merits, whispering intimately to each other. Gua Fufeng's smile quickly turned into a warm one. He was not displeased by the governor's neglect of the governor. After Li Fuzhen and Song Huangmei were done talking about women's whispers, Li Fuzhen wanted to say something but stopped. She caught a glimpse of Gua Fufeng's look from the corner of her eye and said, "Huangmei, do you know that there are many unethical and obscene temples in Huangnan County? Someone told my father about it. They said that not only did Uncle Song not ban it, but he allowed it to flourish. These temples were actually secretly manipulated by someone and became a means to amass wealth. It is a crime against public morals and morals. I came here this time to inform Uncle Song." "I came here to inform Uncle Song." Song Huangmei was shocked. She then narrowed her eyes and smiled. "What do you mean by ruining public morals? Our Bailiang is like this. What is there to ruin? No matter how bad it is, it can't be that bad. I think those bastards who purposely slandered my father must have nothing better to do. Either they are afraid that my father's position is too stable and if my father doesn't move, they won't be able to climb up the ranks. If they don't get promoted, they won't be able to get rich. In the end, it's all because of money. I heard in the restaurant that a few counties in Lingzhou are pointing their spears at the Lingzhou general and purposely muddying the waters. Only our Huangnam County is peaceful. My father has become a target." Li Fuzhen's lips curled into a bitter smile. Gua Fufeng glanced at the girl and was a bit surprised. Song Huangmei glanced at the elegant Gua Fufeng from the corner of her eyes and said to Li Fuzhen, "Sister, Brother Hanlin is really something now. He is so successful that he has become the leader of the crossbowmen in the upper reaches of the border. I heard that he has killed hundreds of Baymang barbarians. There are so many heads on the back of his horse that they cannot fit. Is Brother Hanlin coming home for the new year this year? If he comes back, please remember to invite him to my house. I have to tell Brother Hanlin about my endless admiration for him. Men have to be like Brother Hanlin and go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Otherwise they are not men. Hearing these words, Guafufeng sneered in his heart, but his face remained calm. Li Fuzhen carefully glanced at Guafufeng, then turned his head and forced a smile. Let's go out for a walk. Guafufeng naturally stayed behind. After the two sisters left, Li Fuzhen reached out and pinched Song Huangmei's ear. Stupid girl, you dare to lecture your sister? Didn't I clearly write in your letter that you should not give him a dirty face? Look at you. Song Huangmei curled her lips and said, Anyway, I didn't like that person at first sight. My father said that a scholar shouldn't be too enslaved and jealous. Such a scholar won't have a great future. I think the man surnamed Gua is not lacking in either of these two problems. Sister, listen to me. You refused our Northern Liang devil incarnate at that time, which was such a great feat to vent your anger. Why are you becoming more and more useless in the end? If I had known it would be like this, it would have been better to follow the lecher surnamed Su and become the concubine of the King of Fan in the future. Our administrator will be grinning from ear to ear. Besides, Brother Hanlin was able to turn over a new leaf. Maybe one day that Su guy will suddenly wake up and really go to the border to kill the enemy. Of course, I think that with that guy's nature, it is as difficult as ascending to the heavens for him to kill people with his own hands like Brother Hanlin. He only dares to bully women. I really don't know what those people who say good things about him are thinking. What Bailiang soldiers sent to the capital? What Baymang soldiers? What Baymang soldiers? What Liang Lake? Who would believe that? Li Fuzhen knocked hard on the forehead of the chattering Song Huangmei and angrily glared at her. No one will think you are mute if you don't talk. The two walked to the corner and saw a group of people walking quietly on the blue stone path of the mansion in the distance. Except for the prefect Song Yen, who was wearing official uniform without a sword, most of the other men had eye-catching Bailiang swords hanging on their waists, which added a bit of a cold winter atmosphere. Song Huangmei, who liked to join in the fun, quickly pulled Li Fuzhen's sleeve and said in surprise, Hey, who is this handsome guy with gray hair and murderous aura? Sister Fuzhen, look, my father is such a proud person. When he walks, he is actually one shoulder away from him. No, I have to find an excuse to pay a visit to this hero. Li Fuzhen's expression was complicated and obscure. In the end, Song Huangmei still had some loyalty. She did not leave her sister Fuzhen alone. She was different from the ordinary girls from the noble families. Since young, she was obsessed with playing with guns and sticks. In order to secretly keep a Bailiang sword, she had been nagging her father for many years. In the end, Song Yen had to agree to give her one when she got married. This was because there was an iron law in Bailiang. As long as one was out of the army, even a general was not allowed to secretly wear a Bailiang sword. Even if one was bestowed one was not allowed to take it out. Of course, whether one abided by the law or not was another matter. Many playboys in Bailiang were proud of wearing a cold sword. As long as they were not exposed or seen, most of them would be fine. However, there was a world of difference between carrying a sword privately and carrying one openly. So far, no civil official in Bailiang was qualified to carry a Bailiang sword. This was like the honor of carrying a sword in the palace in the capital. Even though Song Huangmei was the daughter of the prefect, she still admired those soldiers who relied on their own ability to carry a northern cold saber. The disciple of the gang that she fell in love with also swore to her that in the future, before he married her, he would carry a northern cold saber and visit his father-in-law's house to propose marriage. Chapter 897. Song Yen led these uninvited guests into the meeting room at the back of the house. He dismissed the servants and personally poured tea for them. He was very polite, but there was not a hint of fear on his face. Even if the young man sitting in front of him was His Royal Highness of Bailiang, and was the new Lingzhou general who had appeared out of nowhere. Su Fengyan took the teacup and said calmly, Back then, Baymang's Jianghu wanted to infiltrate Bailiang under the orders of Spider-Web Li Mibi. They specifically targeted the weak civil servants and used this to disrupt Bailiang's foundation. In the end, before they could even enter the country, they were all killed at the border. However, there were still some who managed to slip through the net and sneak into Yu and Liang provinces. At that time, to appease the people, many of the incidents were covered up. Lingzhou was relatively better, but the tragedy in this mansion still happened. Over the years, Beiliang's spies have mostly focused on Beimeng's men of sacrifice. Every now and then, there would be a seemingly random murder case, but the people did not know about it. Song Yan smiled. Last year, there was a murder case in Huangnam County. It startled a group of cavalry from another county to cross the border to kill. They uprooted a gang and almost killed the entire family. At that time, I did not know the secret behind it and almost wanted to personally stop it and demand an explanation from that famous school's commander. Later, a spy under General Chu sent me a military order. Only then did I know the danger. Su Fengnian said, Huangnam County is known as Jiangnan beyond the Great Wall. It is where Beiliang's granary is located. As the granary of our Lingzhou, Sir Song must have a heavy responsibility on your shoulders. Song Yan's tone was calm as he replied, It is my duty. Su Fengnian sneered and said, It is also the duty of the prefectural governor to forbid all unsuitable offerings in the county. Lord Song has always been known to be swift and decisive in Lingzhou. How is he neglecting his duty? There were 3 ghost temples in Huangnam County, and the memorial tablets enshrined there were neither the souls of Beiliang heroes nor the gods conferred titles by the imperial court. It was obvious that this was against the etiquette system. However, one of the couplets was written by Lord Song. Could it be that Lord Song was relying on the protection of the administrator to knowingly violate the rules? I've heard that Lord Song is fond of collecting books. You've collected more than 60 unique ancient books, and they're quite expensive. I wonder how many incense offerings did that illegal temple give to Lord Song this year? Song Yan drank a mouthful of tea and said, It's only 500 taels, not worth mentioning. There were many rare books that were coveted, but they were not able to get them. It is a pity. Su Fengnian smiled. Excessive offerings in the territory, embezzling more than 300 taels. The punishment for these 2 crimes is the death penalty. Does Lord Song want to use your head to help me establish my prestige in Lingzhou? Song Yan was indeed the smelly and hard rock in the latrine pit of Lingzhou. He actually smiled. Since your highness has brought a knife and I have admitted my crimes, then it's just a matter of 1 knife. Su Fengnian put down the teacup. You and I both know that you have disobeyed the wishes of the administrator. You want to come out of the Lingzhou officialdom so that I can take note of you, the person who once angered Su Xiao. As long as you're willing to start an uprising in Huangnan County, and let outsiders misunderstand that the administrator has made up his mind to lower his head to the general of Lingzhou, many officials would tactfully restrain their petty actions. After all, if they were really dealt with later, those who came up with the idea would clean their hands and feet while those who did the dirty work themselves would have to bear the consequences. Although the law did not punish the majority, who did not know how to punish the majority? After all, there would always be a few unlucky chickens that would be picked out. In fact, these crafty and slippery petty officials were also afraid of the consequences from the bottom of their hearts. Song Yan, do you think that without your Huangnam County, I will be stuck in the mud? Even if I go ashore, I will be covered in mud and can only run to Liangzhou to complain to Su Xiao? Song Yan shook his head. Your Highness does not lack methods to break out of the situation, you just lack time. After all, even if your Highness kills randomly, you will be able to kill until they are not convinced. In the future, when the military confidants are all in place and some local officials and scholars from Lingzhou keep each other in check, the Lingzhou officialdom will slowly be tamed. However, your Highness does not seem to have such ruthlessness and decisiveness, and you cannot wait. On this point, after your Highness personally came to Huangnam County to find me, Song Yan was even more certain. Seeing that Su Fengnian did not speak, Song Yan continued to speak slowly. If I become the Lingzhou provincial governor, I can be a vanguard for your Highness to get rid of the filth and also appease the administrator on the surface. Both sides will have a way out and I can secretly weaken Sir Li's control in Lingzhou. Su Fengnian smiled and planned on what the prefectural governor would say. Prefectural governor, you overestimate yourself. The provincial governor of Lingzhou can only be Su Beiji. Not you, Song Yan. At most, you can only be the governor of Lingzhou. However, I can tell you something straightforward. When Su Beiji becomes the administrator of Beiliang, you have hopes of becoming the Lingzhou provincial governor. However, that is still too early and you will have to wait. This is because Beiliang will not touch Sir Li, who has done meritorious deeds without any mistakes. The Su and Li families have accumulated 2 generations of incense. Not to mention Sir Li's hard work, just my relationship with Li Hanlin is enough for the administrator to enjoy being an official. Furthermore, it is better to not do something as immoral as killing the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. Of course, if you, Song Yan, really have the ability, with Su Beiji in front of you, even if you can't become the Lingzhou provincial governor, there are still 2 provincial governor seats for me to consider. There are 30 provinces in Liyang. Let's not talk about Su Beiji, who is an anomaly. Count them, how many of them are under 40? Sir Song, you should be content. Song Yan's expression was uncertain. In the end, Su Fengyan said something that made Song Yan not know whether to laugh or cry. Also, there are many people who want to be promoted to Lingzhou provincial governor. If you, Song Yan, want to be promoted, you have to give me half of the books in the building. Many scholars have come to Bailiang and I can use them to buy people's hearts. Without waiting for the governor to nod, Su Fengyan stood up and muttered to himself, Mother *****, no wonder so many people want to be the emperor. They can be so righteous when they are selling their positions for money. Chapter 898. It was probably because the self-proclaimed Lingzhou general was too direct that Song Yan, who had been immersed in officialdom for many years, found it refreshing. At the same time, he also felt a fear that the governor did not want to admit. For a moment, he was speechless and did not make a sound. The tea had already turned cold, but Song Yan still sat there and swirled the cup lid. Su Fengyan did not care about this kind of harmless rudeness. There was a secret report that Li Fuzhen had also come to Huangnam County. He did not want to meet her. If that happened, it would be difficult for both sides, so he prepared to leave this manor that was indeed filled with a gloomy aura. Song Yan was not so conceited that he would not move from his chair. He stood up and sent him to the door. Su Fengyan told him that he would stay in the county capital until tomorrow morning. Song Yan nodded his head and stood in place for a long time before walking back to the chair with heavy steps. He gently pressed one hand on the armrest of the iron pear-wood chair. The steward who had been rejected by the honored guest of the manor carefully stood at the door. He could not help but be worried. Everyone knew that the heir of Bailiang was a strange and absurd person. Now that he had placed the title of Lingzhou general on his head, who knew if he was going to openly attack Lingzhou? His master had better not be the first. Song Yan patted the armrest and turned around to say, Go to Wild Ape House and organize 2,000 books. Then have General Tao send them to the Lingzhou general's manor today. The steward could not help but ask, Master, how will you divide them? Song Yan's face was filled with helplessness as if salt had been poured onto his wound. He sighed and said, Other than the 40 or so rare books that are kept in yellow rosewood boxes, choose the best ones and move them out of Wild Ape House. The steward made a sound of acknowledgement and quickly left. Song Yan rubbed his forehead and said with a bitter smile, It really is more painful than marrying off a daughter. Su Fengyan brought Su Yambing and Hong Shuwen along the small path of the Song Manor. Huyen Guanyin did not enter the manor and remained in the carriage outside the manor. The reason why Su Fengyan chose Huangnam County's Song Yan was mainly because this prefect was quite knowledgeable, but he did not have the temperament of an old scholar. Back then, Song Yan had purposely criticized Su Zhao's unclear rewards and punishments in public. It was just a ploy in the officialdom to attract Su Zhao's attention. It was not really Song Yan who did not understand the rules of the officialdom. It was a pity that he met Su Zhao, the king of Bailiang, who did not know how to read the customs. Of course, Su Fengyan also began to suspect that Su Zhao had intentionally left this stubborn Lingzhou rock for him to subdue. While Su Fengyan was thinking, he raised his head and saw a tall servant girl from the manor. She was dressed simply and strangely had a long sword at her waist. She had an unfriendly expression towards them. After she blocked their path, she pressed down on the hilt of her sword and asked sternly, Who are you? You had bad intentions on the street outside earlier. Why did you barge into the backyard without permission? Young people who did not wear armor but carried cold swords in Lingzhou were definitely those hedonistic sons who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. She had followed the young miss and taught them a lesson countless times. These wastrels who only knew how to rely on their parents' achievements to do evil did not have any memory at all. This time, they actually dared to barge into the prefectural governor's manor to show off. Su Fengyan glanced at her. Hong Shuwen behind him was eager to try. His eyes were dark and cold, and he was about to use the scabbard to knock this girl unconscious. Su Fengyan threw a look at Hong Shuwen, indicating that he should not cause trouble. He smiled and explained to her, I am a guest of your manor. The carriage is parked at the back door and I am about to leave. It is not what you think. Barging into an official's manor is not a small crime. I do not have the courage to come to the prefectural governor's manor to cause trouble. Su Fengnian finished speaking and was about to walk around her. He did not expect her to take 2 steps to the side and block his path again. Hong Shuwen rolled his eyes. This girl really did not know how the word death was written. The maidservant said stiffly, "No, you have to tell me your name. I'll ask the steward, and only after I confirm that there's no mistake will I let you go. Otherwise, if you're a daring book thief or a bandit who intends to commit murder." Hong Shuwen could not help but scold, "Scram!" The maidservant, whose temper was not much better than Hong Shuwen's, was furious and wanted to draw her sword. However, what scared her out of her wits was that no matter how much strength she used, her sword could not leave the scabbard. It was as if it was nailed to the scabbard. Su Fengnian knew that Hong Shuwen did not have this ability, but to Su Yanbing, who had once suppressed Wang Xiao, it was just a small trick. Su Fengnian directly brushed past her. Su Yanbing, who was as calm as an ancient well, followed closely behind. Hong Shuwen had a mischievous expression on his face as he swaggered past her. The maidservant, who had practiced swordsmanship for many years, only thought that she had seen a ghost in broad daylight. She did not dare to be rash and turned her head to look at the 3 people in a daze. Only when she found that they had shadows did she breathe a sigh of relief. She was really afraid that they were the wandering ghosts who had died tragically in this mansion. The maidservant no longer dared to move, but there was someone in the mansion who was still lingering around. His sword was like a rainbow as it flew straight towards them. Su Fengnian frowned. Hong Shuwen was happy that someone had bumped into his blade. However, with His Highness present, he did not act too ruthlessly. He quickly took out his blade and used the scabbard to stab the assassin's chest. Then, he kicked the man's abdomen. Hong Shuwen seemed to feel that he had let the man off easy. He quickly walked over and was about to fiercely step on the assassin's face when Su Fengnian spoke. "That's enough." Hong Shuwen took back his boots that were only an inch away from the man's face. He put on his Bailiang blade again and turned around to walk towards His Royal Highness, who had a bodhisattva's heart. The maidservant, who had previously failed to draw her sword, cried out with a sobbing tone, "Miss!" The maidservant, who had been poked and stepped on by Hong Shuwen, struggled to sit up. She pointed at the fallen sword to the maidservant. Then she shouted towards the backs of the 3 people with difficulty, Hey, the one with grey hair, don't be in a hurry to leave. I have something to ask you." Chapter 899. But to Song Huangmei's disappointment, that guy just left without looking back. She didn't know if he was afraid that her father would help her vent her anger, or he just didn't want to talk to her. But Song Huangmei, who had the spirit of the Jianghu, didn't have the thought of being unforgiving. She was in the wrong to use her sword to keep them, and she didn't think that the other party was unreasonable. Song Huangmei's skill was inferior, and she was convinced. Although Song Huangmei's face was pale from the pain, her curiosity was far greater than her anger. But the maid Iron Cliff was not so open-minded. She helped the young miss pick up the long sword, and after helping the young miss stand up, she knew that she was not the opponent of that group of people, but she still wanted to fight. Song Huangmei grabbed her arm and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. "Iron Cliff, don't go. They are really guests of the house, and my father personally welcomed them." "Ouch, it hurts, I can't talk anymore." The maid Iron Cliff cried. "Young miss, how can there be such guests? I have to reason with the master." Song Huangmei, on the other hand, sucked in a breath of cold air, and smiled with satisfaction. "Iron Cliff, we finally met a master. Go, help me to Sister Fusion. After I catch my breath, I will ask my father who that guy is." Su Fengnian walked to the front of the carriage and said to Hong Shuwen, "Huangnam County has a few Beimang spies that have been rooted here for many years. Seeing that you have nothing to do, you can go and work with our spies tonight, but we won't record your military merits. Remember, you have to follow their rules. If I know that you killed people, don't think about getting involved in this kind of thing in the future." Hong Shuwen nodded vigorously, his eyes were burning, and he licked the corner of his mouth with a smile that was terrifying. Gua Fufeng sat alone in front of the brazier in the room. He did not feel that he was being looked down upon. He even had the leisure to look at the decorations in the room. If he did not have such shrewdness and broad-mindedness, how could he have made Li Fujian, one of the few wealthy women in Bailiang, fall in love with him? Gua Fufeng was not dissatisfied with his current situation. Gua Fufeng believed that his plan was flawless. If his brother-in-law Li Hanlin continued to be an unruly hedonist, it would be fine. Gua Fufeng had never been a rigid scholar and did not mind helping Li Hanlin do evil. Now that Li Hanlin had joined the border, it was even better. In the future, when Li Hanlin returned to his hometown with glory, he would most likely take the path of a military official. A family also had to walk on two legs. Wouldn't the path of a civil official be filled by him, the virtuous son-in-law of the Li family? The two of them helped each other. With Li Gongda, who had only been the administrator for less than 2 years, guiding him, the Li family would naturally be prosperous. Gua Fufeng even thought of the scene where he would meet the new Prince Liang in the future. Now, what was a little disdain? Even Li Fuzhen did not know that two officials highly regarded by the administrator had approached Gua Fufeng in private. They were just short of calling each other brothers. Gua Fufeng narrowed his eyes and looked at the charcoal fire in the brazier. This trip to Huangnam County was a secret. Li Fuzhen was thin-skinned and inarticulate. He still needed to rely on him to solve his father-in-law's problems. Huangnam County was the place of prosperity for the administrator. If there was a fire in the backyard, it would be a topic of ridicule in the prince's household. Gua Fufeng believed that Song Yan knew the severity of the situation. Previously, he was neither cold nor warm to him. Li Fuzhen sat down beside him. Gua Fufeng saw that there was no one around and said softly, "I have my own plans on how to persuade Sir Song." "Fuzhen, you don't have to worry. Also, according to what you said, the man that Miss Song likes is a disciple of a second-rate gang in Huangnam County. If there's a chance, the four of us can find an elegant restaurant to have a meal. Although I'm not a member of the Jianghu, I know a lot of Jianghu stories. I'm not afraid to have nothing to say to that person." Li Fuzhen suddenly asked, "Fufeng, aren't you tired?" Gua Fufeng smiled and asked back, "Tired?" Li Fuzhen turned her head and did not look at him. Gua Fufeng hesitated for a moment and did not hold her hand. He placed his hands on the brazier and enjoyed the warmth. His voice was warm as he said, "There's nothing to be tired about. In order for us to have comfortable days in the future, it's natural for me to be tired. One day, I will let Ling Zhou and even Bailiang remember the name Gua Fufeng." Li Fuzhen did not feel tired when she went on a hunger strike with her parents in order to be with him. She did not know why, but when she heard the bold words of the man she admired, she felt tired. Gua Fufeng said softly, "Fuzhen, don't worry. Sooner or later, I will let your father and Hanlin acknowledge me." Li Fuzhen nodded her head. Song Huangmei held his chest with one hand and his abdomen with the other. He entered the room and sat down. Li Fuzhen asked worriedly, "What's wrong?" Song Huangmei said mysteriously, "It's nothing. Didn't we see those people full of killing intent earlier? I personally went to test them. Guess what? I was taught a lesson by them. That's nothing. What happened to Iron Cliff was strange. They were not even able to draw their swords. Those people are definitely experts." Li Fuzhen asked with a panicked expression, "Does your father know about this?" Song Huangmei shook his head and said, "Not yet. When I'm not in such a sorry state, I'll go and ask. Otherwise, my father will definitely ground me for half a month. I might not even be able to go to the lantern market." Li Fuzhen, who wanted to continue hiding the truth, grabbed Song Huangmei's hand and blurted out, "The person in the lead is surnamed Su. He's the current general of Ling Zhou." Song Huangmei was dumbfounded. He then shook his head and smiled. "No way. Where did Su get his killing intent from? Him. Even if he wears a Bailiang sword, he's just an embroidered pillow. Impossible. If that person is Su Fengnian, then I'm a female sword immortal." Song Yen stood behind the three of them and inadvertently heard this. For the first time, he was furious at his daughter. He said angrily, "Song Huangmei, fine, fine, fine. You're a female sword immortal, right? You'll be grounded for a year. If you dare to go out, I'll break your legs. This time, I'll do what I say." Song Huangmei shrunk her neck and asked softly, "Father, is it really that Su guy?" Song Yen said sternly, "What Su guy? It's His Royal Highness." It was the first time Song Huangmei saw her father scold someone with such a stern face. She did not even feel wronged when she was beaten by Hong Shuwen. Now, she was so wronged that tears welled up in her eyes. She sobbed and shouted angrily, "It's that Su guy. Even if he's standing in front of me, I'll still call him Su. He's an ignorant and incompetent second generation. If he wasn't born into a good family and followed the general surname Su, then what is he, Su Fengnian? Outside the door, the housekeeper of the Song residence wished he could dig a hole and hide in it. He swallowed his saliva and turned his neck stiffly. He looked at the Su guy who had left and returned. He did not know how to fix the situation for his young miss. Song Yen saw his daughter suddenly stop crying. He realized the change behind him. After he turned around, even the governor who had experienced the storms of officialdom felt his heart turn to ashes. Chapter 900. Li Fuzhen closed her eyes, as if she did not dare to face the disaster of the Song family. Su Fengnian's expression was calm, and one could not tell if he was happy, angry, or sad. He said to Song Yen, "Official Song, I have something to discuss with you." After saying that, Su Fengnian turns around and walks down the stairs. Song Yen was angry with Song Huangmei before. In the face of a disaster, he quietly presses his hand to his daughter, who causes trouble from her mouth. He tries his best to squeeze out a smile, indicating that she should not panic. Turning around and stepping over the threshold, Song Yen let out a long breath, which was a bit cold. He quickly followed the Lingzhou general. Song Yen had been in a high position for a long time, and his understanding of shrewdness was much deeper than ordinary people who did not have to worry about food and clothing. Many of the sons of Zhenliang were not evil people who bullied men and women. Normally, they would greet and send off people, and when dealing with officials like Song Yen, who held real power, they would be very gentle and polite. When dealing with subordinates, they would also have the ability to control people. They would pretend to be profound, and their words and actions were strange, making people afraid. However, in Song Yan's eyes, this kind of shrewdness was not a high realm. They would not be moved by interests, and they would not be affected by the ways of the world. No matter how big or small, they would be able to remain calm. This was the true shrewdness. Song Yen was afraid that Su Fengnian was the former. When things were going well, he was easy to talk to, and when doing business with people, he would be fair. However, if things did not go his way, he would show his fangs and not treat people as people. Song Yen did not think that a governor of Huangnam County could make His Royal Highness, who was Bailiang, angry and not have any scruples in doing things. Su Fengnian slowed down his steps and walked side by side with Song Yen. He softly joked, "In the past, you scolded Su Xiao, and now your daughter scolded me. Does the Song family have a grudge with the Su family?" Song Yen was a bit embarrassed. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "I came back this time to tell you that your daughter and a maidservant tried to stop me from leaving the manor and suffered a little. The Song family is in the wrong for this matter, but I'm afraid that when a woman holds a grudge, she will be unreasonable and talk nonsense. This will cause the governor to hold a grudge against me, so I felt the need to come back and make things clear. However, if it was just this matter, I wouldn't have bothered to make a big fuss about it. The main thing is that there are several Baimang thieves' lairs in Huangnam County that have been hidden for many years. This time a large number of scholars are going to die, and there are many spies and men of sacrifice in disguise. Even some Baimang spies who were originally rooted in the Central Plains have begun to take the opportunity to infiltrate Bailiang. Tonight, someone will clean up Huangnam County. I will leave tomorrow morning, so I felt that I needed to inform you in advance so that you won't be flustered when the time comes." When I returned to the residence, I saw that the Wild Ape House had started moving books. Song Yen didn't dare to form a grudge with the young man next to him. He didn't care about etiquette and directly asked, "Your Highness, are you really not angry at my daughter's rudeness?" Su Fengnian asked in return, "Scolding people in my own home is better than those people who stab me in the back in Lingzhou. I can still endure the latter and haven't made a move until now. What are you worried about? If you really feel guilty, then give me another 500 books from the Wild Ape House's collection." Song Yen sighed and said, "It was me who measured the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain." Su Fengnian said self-deprecatingly, "What kind of gentleman am I? You guys, once bitten, twice shy. Based on my bad reputation in Bailiang." Song Yen suddenly turned his head and saw the administrator's daughter hurriedly running over. She stopped and looked at them without any intention of leaving. Su Fengnian hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Sir Song, I want to say a few words to Miss Li. Go to the back door and wait for a moment." Song Yen nodded and left with quick steps. Li Fuzhen didn't take another step forward. With a cold expression she asked, "What do you want to do to the Song family?" Su Fengnian didn't beat around the bush with her. You actually want to ask me what I plan to do to Song Huangmei, right? Don't worry, Li Fuzhen interrupted Su Fengnian's words and said with a cold smile. Do you really believe that I can be at ease? Su Fengnian said calmly, Li Fuzhen, if I remember correctly, I don't owe you anything. Li Fuzhen gritted her teeth and said, if something happens to Hanlin at the border, I will hate you for the rest of my life. Su Fengnian turned to leave, but he was stopped by Song Huangmei. However, the swordswoman learned her lesson this time and said timidly, Your Highness, I will take responsibility for my own actions. Don't make things difficult for my father. Su Fengnian reached out and pinched her cheek. You scolded me, and I took advantage of you. Let's call it even. Song Huangmei was stunned on the spot. After a long time, she came back to her senses. She jumped up and ran toward Li Fuzhen, chirping like a bird. Sister Fuzhen, did you see that? His Highness really has a murderous aura. He took advantage of me, but I didn't even dare to move. If it were a normal lecher, I would have chopped off his dog's paw. Sister, you don't know, but the two retainers by his side are very powerful. I've always said that a man with a cold blade is considered handsome. Sigh, now I feel that most of the rumors are true. Sister Fuzhen, you don't practice martial arts or swordsmanship, so you don't know that there is a saying in Jianghu that His Royal Highness is definitely an expert. I just don't know if he can fly on a sword and make a sound. Su Fengnian came to the back door of the mansion. Song Yan asked softly, Do you need me to do anything to clean up Huangnam County tonight? Su Fengnian shook his head and said, No need. Song Yan said, If your Highness doesn't mind this mansion's lifeless atmosphere, you might as well stay here. Su Fengnian smiled and said, Why? Are you afraid that I will suddenly die in Huangnam County? Song Yan, whose thoughts were exposed, laughed. Su Fengnian didn't let Song Yan see him out. He sat in the carriage and quietly drove out of the alley. Su Yanbing drove the carriage to a private mansion located in the southwest corner of the county. Su Fengnian pushed the door and entered. The small courtyard was narrow. On the cold floor, there were more than 20 people kneeling. Su Fengnian crossed his fingers and laughed at himself in his heart. Finally, he felt a little like His Royal Highness. He said a few words and stood up. These 20 or so people wore different clothes. Some wore the brocade and marten coats of the rich, while others wore the rough hemp clothes of the countryside. There was even someone who wore a jade pendant that matched the official's uniform. Su Fengnian walked over and pulled off the jade pendant. The official wasn't low either. He was a lower 9th rank official. After stealing it, he didn't rush to return the jade pendant. The leader was an average-looking woman. As soon as she stood up, she knelt down again. With an involuntary trembling voice, she carefully picked out her words and slowly reported. Reporting to Your Highness, according to our investigation, there are 3 Beimang spy lairs in Huangnam County. 2 of them have been operating for more than 10 years. According to General Chu's arrangements, a group of Bailiang's peregrine falcons will enter Huangnam County at 5 o'clock. Another group of Bailiang's Eagle Guard, trained as crossbowmen, will arrive at 5 o'clock. Your Highness only needs to give the order, and we can uproot these 3 malignant tumors. Chapter 901. There were all kinds of Bailiang spies, but the ones who were really responsible for cleaning up were all peregrine falcons. This peregrine falcon was responsible for patrolling Bailiang. Most of them were Jianghu masters raised by the Bailiang Palace. Lu Qiantang, Xu Xiao, and the group who later intercepted and killed Prince Zhao Kai were all men of sacrifice who killed people in exchange for secret martial arts manuals and wealth. There were also some desperados who had committed capital crimes in Liang and had no choice but to rely on Bailiang to seek a chance of survival. However, the current Bailiang spies were divided into 2. Half of the power was taken from Chu Lushan's hands and fell into the hands of Second Commandery Princess Su Weisheng. Su Weisheng was too lazy to waste time on the old personnel, so he directly transferred nearly 100 elite crossbowmen from the Bailiang army to become the Eagle Guard. They worked together with the peregrine falcon in name, but in reality, they were restricting each other. Therefore, the Eagle Guard swam together on the land of Bailiang, choosing people to devour. As for the affairs outside the Great Wall, the old spy leader Chu Lushan still controlled most of them. Su Weisheng seemed to have no intention of meddling with them for the time being. Su Fengnian had almost no involvement in these 2 most filthy organizations, but he had heard about the general structure. For example, The spies in the courtyard at this time were mostly turtle fish, who were dormant in one place all year round and were not allowed to move. There were also a few herring fish, who were more flexible. They regularly returned to Liangzhou and were responsible for acting as the middleman to pass on military intelligence. Many turtles died of old age without knowing the identity of their companions. It was very unusual for them to gather together like this. When they were waiting, they were told by the female spy leader, Huang Nan, nicknamed Black Carp, that a big shot from the top was coming to Huangnam County to personally set up a trap. However, almost no one thought that it would be the Crown Prince of Bailiang who would come to my house, so they were a little scared for a moment. They were not commoners who only knew how to spread false information. Based on their experience and status, they had seen some secret records and heard some secrets with their own eyes. They had heard some secrets with their own ears. His Royal Highness's actions. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Haley, stand up and speak. Originally, it was agreed that your immediate superior, Wang Tongkai, would come to Huangnam County. This crown prince came up with the idea on the spur of the moment and replaced Wang Tongchue's position. Don't mind a layman telling you what to do. For tonight's operation, this crown prince will only watch from the sidelines and will not participate." The woman who had been in charge of Huangnam County's espionage operations felt relieved. She stood up and was about to say a few polite words when His Royal Highness grabbed her neck and broke it with a crack. Then, he threw her to the side with a smile on his face. Su Fengnian continued to smile and said, "I forgot to mention that Wang Tongkai didn't come to Huangnam County not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. On the way here, he was killed by Chu Lushan's men. This Haley has been flirting with a Baimang official for many years. Huangnam County has been rotten from the beginning to the end. This crown prince knows that other than her, there are actually a few people in the courtyard who have sided with Baimang's spider web. This time we have mobilized so many people. In the end, the ones who will die are just some insignificant minions. This won't do." The remaining people in the courtyard looked at each other in dismay. The jade turtle, who had already become a Bailiang official, took a step forward and gently looked at Haley's corpse. There was a desolate smile on his face as if he had accepted his fate. Su Fengnian ignored this spy who had exposed his identity and ignored him. He walked up the steps and put his hands in his sleeves, leaving only the jade pendant dangling from his sleeves. He smiled and asked, "Is there anyone else who wants to die a quick death? If you are caught by this crown prince, you won't receive the same treatment as Haley." The courtyard was dead silent. It was obvious that no one responded to His Royal Highness' good intentions. Su Fengnian slowly said 3 names. The 3 of them were swiftly and violently cut in half by Hong Shuwen's saber. Su Fengnian said, "According to a secret report, there is a Baimang loyalist in the courtyard. His identity is unknown, but it doesn't matter. Huangnam County's spy agency was originally going to be overthrown. In order to save time and avoid future troubles, we can only kill them all. Huangnam County is a feng shui treasure land that Baimang's spider web has worked hard to develop. This crown prince believes in that big fish. His life is more valuable than all the Bailiang spies in the courtyard combined. Bailiang won't lose out on this deal." A fat rich merchant was surprisingly agile. He stepped lightly on his toes and was about to jump over the courtyard wall when Hong Shuwen stabbed him in the back with a halberd. His body hung heavily on the wall. Hong Shuwen walked over and grabbed his legs and pulled him back into the courtyard. With his death, the turtles and reeds who were still standing in the courtyard breathed a sigh of relief. If this guy had refused to give himself away and insisted on implicating the rest of the spies, they could only stretch their necks and wait to be slaughtered. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to go against the cold-blooded Bailiang crown prince. As turtles and reeds, most of them had families, old and young. If they died here today, they would be sacrificing their lives for the Bailiang. If they wanted to hate someone, they could only hate those Baimang spies for being too cunning. However, after they died, their families, old and young, would still be able to live without worry. Just when everyone thought the dust had settled, Su Fengnian followed Su Yanbing's finger and stared at a middle-aged man with an old-fashioned face. "This fatty is willing to die for you in order to protect you. It can be seen that your identity is not ordinary. Otherwise, if I were him, even if I were to die, I would drag the rest down with me. You're Han Shang, right? In the past, you've accomplished several great things at the border of Yuzhou. You can be considered to have made great contributions to the Bailiang. These years, you've been at odds with Haley and have been ostracized by him for many years. Originally, you were the most innocent spy in the courtyard. However, do you know when you gave yourself away? Han Shang smiled gloomily and looked at Su Yanbing. I've long heard that there are hidden talents in the king's mansion. However, the king of Baelyong's earthly branch men of sacrifice have all made a move. Only a guy called Su Yanbing has been doing nothing all this time. No one can figure out his depth. The Baemang side speculated that this person's realm was higher than Spear Immortal Wang Xiu's junior brother, Han Laozhan. Now, it seems that this is indeed the case. I've clearly suppressed my heartbeat and thought that there were no flaws. I didn't expect that I would still be seen through. Unfortunately, I can't spread this news. My mistake was that I didn't expect His Royal Highness to come in person and Su Yanbing to accompany him. It wasn't that Han Shang didn't want to put up a last-ditch struggle. However, he knew that his efforts were futile when he was targeted by Su Yanbing. Han Shang's vision went black. He didn't even see how Su Yanbing attacked before he fainted. Su Fengnian threw the jade pendant back to the official and smiled. Wang Tongke, Huangnam County has made up for your mistakes. Wang Tongke took the jade pendant and wore it on his waist. Only after he tore off his mask did the people in the courtyard realize that this person was Wang Tongke, the #1 spy in Huangnam County for more than 10 years. A man whose wife and children had never seen his true face for more than 10 years. He followed His Royal Highness into the room and asked softly, Your Highness, why don't you let me continue to hide in the dark? Although Huangnam County will be much cleaner after tonight, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be any accumulation of filth in the future. Su Fengnian said, You don't have to stay in Huangnam County anymore. Say goodbye to your wife and children and then go to Yuzhou. Wang Tongke nodded and didn't have any objections. Su Fengnian suddenly said, I know that you've nurtured a disciple with a very clean background. Chu Lushan thinks highly of him. Take him to Yuzhou and work hard for a few more years to train that young man. When he takes over your mantle, you can stop being a spy and reunite with your wife and children. In the future, you can change your appearance and live a stable life. Wang Tongke, who had been honed to the point that his appearance wouldn't change even when faced with blades and axes, was stunned. Su Fengnian smiled and said, Although most people would be even more worried if I said, Don't worry. I hope that you can rest assured. Baelyong hasn't mistreated its meritorious subjects in the past, and it won't do so in the future. The man suddenly laughed and said, I appreciate your highness's good intentions, but Wang Tongchue's life is cheap and he has long been used to scheming against others. If you suddenly ask this lowly one to plant flowers, this lowly one will feel even worse than killing this lowly one. Besides, our line of work isn't like mounting a horse to fight and killing enemies. It's useless once you're old. The older you get, the more proficient you'll be. Su Fengnian was speechless. Wang Tongke blushed for the first time and said, Your Highness, my 10-year-old son is full of admiration for your Highness after listening to the storyteller's story. This kid has been very strong since he was young and wants to go to the Phoenix Battalion to be a White Horse loyal follower. Su Fengnian nodded and smiled. Good, I'll allow him to go to the Phoenix Battalion when he's of age. Wang Tongke suppressed his excitement and said in a low voice, Your Highness, shall we plan tonight's extermination? Su Fengnian waved his hand and said, Leave Han Shang to me. As for the rest, Chu Lushan's arrangements will remain unchanged. Hong Shuwen will move with you tonight. You can go about your business. The remaining people in the courtyard still need you to pacify. Wang Tongke made a sound of acknowledgement and quietly left the room. Chapter 902. In the Song Manor, Song Yen took the initiative to find Li Fuzhen and went for a walk in the manor. Song Huangmei, who had a lively personality, had experienced many twists and turns and dared to touch this bad luck. She obediently took off her sword and went to learn embroidery. Song Yen thought about it and slowly said, Niece, let's talk about something that might be a little boring. After Uncle is done, you can go back and tell the administrator why Huangnam County has changed. Now that Lingzhou's officialdom is undergoing a drastic change, if I, Song Yen, were not the administrator's disciple, but the Lingzhou general's advisor, I would put myself in his shoes. Standing in His Highness the heir apparent's point of view to look at the problem, there are 3 ways to deal with it. The worst way is to try to use killing people to convince the masses. There are also 3 levels of high, middle, and low. Killing a large number of officials was a bad idea, so it could only cause the people in Lingzhou to lose their confidence. Not only did the local officials in Lingzhou feel that this Lingzhou general was useless, Even the scholars from other places who were watching the show thought that they had married the wrong man and had met the wrong person. If they could kill the officials that caused trouble today, they could kill them tomorrow. The situation was precarious. So what if they got an official position in a short period of time? The best plan was to kill a few officials like Song Yen, which was relatively better because Su Li was not the main instigator of the chaos in Lingzhou. He was ordered by officials around the same level as Song Yen. There were civil officials and generals, and they were all deep-rooted local snakes. With this group of people secretly instructing them, Lingzhou was able to work together. As for whether to kill Song Yen, kill the governor, or take the chance to cut off the limbs of the Huaihua general of Longqing Prefecture, there was not much of a difference. The officials that caused trouble were timid and kept quiet out of fear. The Lingzhou officialdom would have a moment of peace, but this plan was not a long-term plan. Once the Lingzhou general left, Lingzhou would still be Lingzhou. This was the same logic as the dynasty ruling over corrupt officials. Treating the symptoms but not the root cause. When the spring breeze blows, the weeds grow. The best way is very simple. You just need to kill one person. Li Fuzhen had never been interested in the officialdom, but when the governor talked about it, she did not find it boring. However, Song Yan's following words caused her to lose all color in her face. That is to kill Administrator Darren. Killing anyone would be better than killing your father to intimidate Lingzhou. Even the administrator of Bailiang, whose official rank was the same as that of Bailiang's protector general, could be killed. If one angered His Royal Highness, who could escape the calamity? Moreover, niece, you certainly know what kind of official Administrator Darren is. In the officialdom, people would burn the bridge after crossing the river. There was no end to it. In the Li Yongwen, there was the Song family, which had 3 heroes and 2 teachers. In the military, there was the Han family, which had been guarding the border of Jizhou for generations. Compared to official Li, they were all genuine pillars of the imperial court. In this sense, if they could die, official Li could die many times over. To put it bluntly, the Li family had plundered so much gold and silver. After the confiscation, the soldiers at the border would be able to enjoy a lavish new year. There were 20 to 30 pawnshops under the Li family's name. There were countless bribes from the subordinates. Rare toys, antiques, calligraphy, and paintings were bought by the Li family with their left hand and sold at a high price from the pawnshops with their right hand. Not to mention, there were also 2 horse caravans with more than 100 people that specialized in salt and iron trade and tea-horse trade. Thus when I, Song Yen, heard that His Royal Highness was the general of Lingzhou, my first thought was that the Su family wanted to deal with your Li family. I even sent someone to send a secret letter to the border asking if your brother Li Hanlin was under house arrest. I don't know if it was because teacher was under the light or because he trusted the old relationship between the Su and Li families too much. Li Fuzhen finally spoke. Our family would not have fallen to such a state. Song Yen smiled and said something strange. If these words came from teacher's mouth, uncle might not believe it. Li Fuzhen had a blank expression. Song Yen continued. His Highness did not use these 3 plans to resolve Lingzhou's predicament, which was unexpected. This was because the 2 best plans above the worst plan all tested one's maturity. If one was not careful, it would be a thankless end. The middle plan was to use people to kill people and build momentum. None of these could be lacking. The best plan was for him to not be the general of Lingzhou who was personally involved in the situation. He used the power of the king of Bailiang to put pressure on the administrator and Zhong Honggu. Then with Huang Chong and the others who had just entered Bailiang, he worked from the bottom up step by step. One on top, one on the bottom, one on the inside, one on the outside. In the end, he had Su official, who was caught between the 2 sides, go with the flow and follow the trend. However, while such a method was meticulous, it could only be done gradually. At the very least, it would take a year or 2. Since His Highness for some reason chose the middle plan, which was more radical than the worst plan, then Uncle, who did not want to be the governor of a prefecture, had a chance. Other than Uncle's own ambition, there is actually one thing that I need to tell Sir Li. The one who needs to defile himself is not Song Yen, but teacher himself. Song Yen is not so important as to defile his own reputation. On the other hand, it is time for teacher to reduce his own power. Song Yen leaving the Li family is the right time. Li Fuzhen said softly, I don't know how much of Uncle's words are true or false. I also don't know if these plans are good or bad. I only remember that Father once said in private that Uncle Song was not as good as him as an official, but he saw the situation better than him. It was just that Bailiang is small, so Uncle Song could only use 2 of his power. Song Yen was stunned. After a long time he sighed heavily. Teacher knows me. Li Fuzhen raised her head and looked into the distance. She asked, Sir Song, is His Royal Highness a smart person like you? Song Yen had probably just joined the Lingzhou general, so it was hard for him not to be a bit worried. He did not directly give an answer. He only said, in the past, it was not good to make wild guesses. Now that we have met, it is clear. In Bailiang, there is no one more self-deprecating than him. Since Li Fuzhen called him Sir Song and not Uncle Song, Song Yen knew that his relationship with his teacher's family had pretty much stopped there. He said calmly, Song Yen will say one last thing from the bottom of my heart. That Gua Fufeng is a person who can only share riches and honor. As for whether or not he can share hardships, I am thinking too much. The Li family will probably not collapse one day. There was no anger on Li Fuzhen's face. She gently bowed and left slowly. In the secret room of the private residence in Huangnam County, Han Shang had already been skinned alive and had his tendons pulled out, but he still stubbornly refused to say a word. Su Fengnian stretched his hand into the basin to wash his hands. Looking at the slightly rippling, thick blood, he sighed. Not everyone can be a great spy. Hong Shuwen's hair stood on end as he stood to the side. Su Yanbing, on the other hand, had a calm expression. Hong Shuwen looked at His Royal Highness's hands that were still slightly red. Should I go change the basin of water? Su Fengnian nodded. Su Yanbing waited for Hong Shuwen to change the basin of water before quietly saying, Your Highness, if I am not wrong, is this Han Diaoxi's unique silk drawing technique? Chapter 903. Su Fengnian didn't hide anything from this loyal and devoted senior. He pointed at his own head and said with a smile, After Han Shangxian was killed in Divine Martial City, I had an unorthodox method to use his head to learn some things. Back then, when I killed Raccoon Diwu in northern Mang, I also benefited greatly from it. However, my foundation in the Yellow Court was stripped away by Lu Hao's astronomical technique. My cultivation is not good enough. Even if I know how to use many techniques, I can't use them. It's like a low-level swordsman who has memorized all the moves of the 2-sleeved green snake, but his strength is not enough. 4 realm first level. I have already entered the false realm 3 times. Maybe 4 times. No one has ever done it before. I don't have any regrets. Su Yanbing did not say anything else. Hong Shuwen brought in a basin of clean water. Su Fengnian washed his hands thoroughly and shook off the water. With a thought, 7 or 8 flying swords flew out of Han Shang's body one by one. They spun around in the basin of water and then disappeared into his sleeves. As long as the sword embryo was complete, these little things did not need to be supported by internal energy. Thus, Su Fengnian could use them with ease. Su Fengnian left the secret room and returned to the house. In the courtyard, the turtles and reeds from Huangnam County, who had been cleared of suspicion, began to move stealthily in an orderly manner. Some acted as bait, while others acted as camouflage. Wang Tongke also disappeared without a trace. Although everyone in the courtyard was on the brink of death, it was actually very common for some mobile spies other than the turtles, especially spies near the border. In the past, there was a county in Yuzhou where spies were so exaggerated that Chu Lushan had to personally lead 600 cavalry to encircle them. Only one of the 17 spies did not stand in Bei Mang's camp. The rest were infiltrated by Bei Mang, while the rest were lured or forced to side with Bei Mang. Chu Lushan walked in alone and faced the 17 spies. He said self-deprecatingly, I am honored to tell you that after I joined, you only have 2 enemies. Of course, Bei Mang's southern dynasty was not much better than Bailiang's. Su Fengnian moved a chair and sat under the eaves, quietly waiting for the Peregrine Falcon and Eagle Guard to arrive. According to the secret report, the 3 lairs of the 2 old and 1 new in Huangnam County were located in a Taoist temple, a gang, and a brothel. During the Spring and Autumn War, the brothels of various countries were no doubt the spies. So when Chu was in charge of the spies, he was disdainful when he took charge of the report, he said. He captured a popular courtesan from each of the 10 brothels. 3 or 3. At the end of the Spring and Autumn War, there were very few idiots who would do such a thing. Firstly, it was very difficult to train an elite spy who was a woman. Secondly, everyone already knew that it was easy to gather information in brothels. The local spies kept a close eye on the prostitutes in brothels. If there was even the slightest bit of suspicion, They would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. Now that the smoke had dispersed, female spies began to hide in the brothels again. It was just that there were not many of them. Su Fengnian leaned against the back of the chair under the eaves. He slowly thought of Dun Huang and Wu Mainyang. Compared to Jiangnan, Bailiang was late at night. Su Fengnian looked up at the quiet and peaceful twilight. The Beimang spies, who did not know they were in danger because of the Korean merchants and the black carp shelter, could still live for a few more hours. There was a series of subtle knocks on the door. Hong Shuwen, who was in charge of odd jobs, went to open the door. Su Fengnian looked over and smiled. He saw a familiar face. When the person saw His Royal Highness, she was also pleasantly surprised. Su Fengnian knew her name was Ren Shanyu. She was a woman in her 30s. She used to use a pair of Xianhua axes. She still had the face of a young girl. What was especially rare was her chest. In Xinwu City, she had almost died at the hands of a catman. In front of the catman, who was known as Invincible Han, anyone could die at a moment's notice. Su Fengnian smiled and asked the woman, who was kneeling on the ground, to stand up. He said softly, "Ren Shanyu, this time you are leading 40 Eagle Guard into Huangnam County? That's a promotion. Congratulations." Ren Shanyu, whose name was called out by His Highness, smiled brightly, revealing a pair of cute little canine teeth that did not match her age. It was hard to imagine that such a little girl, who caused people's imagination to run wild, would wipe the blood on her chest with the axe after chopping people like cutting vegetables. She said shyly, "Your Highness, it is Wang Lin, who appeared in Xinwu City with me, who is leading the team. I am just a pawn who is scouting ahead, similar to a scout in the army. The Peregrine Falcon has already met with Wang Tongkai." Wang Lin and the others entered the city at 5:15. Su Fengnian nodded and asked Hong Shuwen to bring a chair for the woman. She seemed to have received a great reward that she did not dare to hope for. Her face was filled with surprise and anxiety. She sat down gently, but only dared to put half of her butt on the chair. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "You just became a small official? It doesn't match your achievements. Do you want me to help you say something?" The woman, who had once become a bandit in Jinzi Mountain and killed countless people, was fidgeting uneasily. Her earlobes were already red. She tried her best to calm herself down and not let her chest tremble too much. She said solemnly, "This servant was born in a lowly family in Dongyue. If it wasn't for the fact that Northern Liang took me in when I was 9 years old and became a spy, I would have died long ago. I'm also stupid. I've delayed military plans twice. If I were anywhere else, I would have slit my throat and committed suicide to atone for my sins. I'm already satisfied to be alive." Su Fengnian put his elbow on the armrest of the chair and rested his chin on his hand. He smiled and said, "I didn't expect Lu Chou'er to still have some humanity left." Hearing His Royal Highness's frank comments about General Chu, whom all Bailiang spies respected like a god, Ren Shanyu thought she had made a big mistake. She was so scared that she wanted to stand up and kneel down again. Su Fengnian pressed down with his other hand. "I'm just saying. Don't be nervous." Ren Shanyu's butt fell back on the chair. She was even more afraid to speak. Ren Shanyu gathered her courage and sneaked a glance at Su Fengnian. She saw His Royal Highness squinting his eyes and smiling enchantingly. She clenched the corners of her clothes tightly. Her face was covered in sweat. She wanted to say something. Su Fengnian said helplessly, "If you have something to say, say it." Ren Shanyu gritted her teeth. She lowered her head and murmured, "Your Highness, I only have one wish in my life." Su Fengnian turned to look at the woman. He asked curiously, "Tell me." She raised her head. After saying this, she fell limp on the chair. This time, her butt was finally able to sit firmly on the chair. Hong Shuwen wanted to laugh but didn't dare. He felt uncomfortable holding it in. He admired this woman from the bottom of his heart. She actually dared to take liberties with His Royal Highness. Her wish was to have His Royal Highness personally touch her chest before she died. She even said that this was the only thing she could give him. Hong Shuwen didn't know why, but when he saw the woman's resolute and clear eyes, he felt an indescribable sadness. Su Fengnian stretched out his hand and helped her tidy up her hair. Then Su Fengnian retracted his hand and looked forward. He muttered to himself, "This time on the way to Huangnam County, I kept thinking about how to do things in Lingzhou. With those people who only talk about rules and not reason, Is it worth it for me to talk about rules, reason, and affection? But now I understand. The woman who forgot to be shy clearly didn't understand what His Royal Highness was saying. Su Fengnian's lips curled up. I don't need to touch it. I know that place is very... After pausing for a long time, His Royal Highness finally spat out 2 words. Spectacular. Chapter 904. 9,000-word chapters. In the 17th day of this month, I have only updated 18 chapters, only making up for the 5 chapters one owed last month. However, the 18 chapters already have a total of 90,000 words. The average word count of each chapter is close to 5,000 words. I think that the lack of updates is still a necessary effort. Moreover, this kind of updating without deliberately splitting the chapters to make up for the lack of updates is also an effort. In the future, I won't talk about updating in the chapters. In any case, I will remember it in my heart. When night fell, Hong Shuwen excitedly followed Wang Tongkei to fish with a net. The other 2 members of the Phoenix Battalion stayed in the courtyard. Su Fengnian left the courtyard and only brought Su Yanbing and Huyen Guanyin, who had disguised herself as a page boy. They came to a place that would make a virtuous gentleman both spit and swallow his saliva. The brothel was coincidentally adjacent to the brothel alley in Huangnam County where the net was being collected. Lingzhou was rich and populous. Visiting prostitutes was a common practice. Many of the bodhisattvas and heavenly maidens that merchants spent a lot of money to provide for also had plump bodies. Many monks who saw the sculptures and murals all lamented that the human heart was not what it used to be. Walking in the brightly lit and powdered fireworks alley, there were many ambitious and arrogant guests wearing mink coats. Huyen Guanyin followed behind Su Fengnian, afraid that she would lose him. No matter what situation Su Yanbing was in, his state of mind was like an ancient well without ripples. Perhaps he was also like this when he attained Heaven's Gate. As the former hedonistic leader of Bailiang, Su Fengnian was familiar with this kind of work. He chose the most brightly lit Peach Cheeks brothel. The brothel was 3 stories high and the lanterns hung high. It was not like the neighboring brothels where a few women with heavy makeup were sent out to solicit business. Su Fengnian waved his hand and threw a piece of silver to the brothel's turtle leg. The silver did not even need to be weighed and instantly slid into his sleeve. The young man's smiling face immediately became attentive. This kind of person was not simple. He had good eyesight, a good tongue, and a strong body. He sized them up from head to toe and decided that there were a few distinguished guests who could spend a lot of money. He immediately shouted, but in reality, he was sending a secret message to the brothel keeper. As expected, a woman walked out slowly from the brothel. However, compared to most brothel keepers who were middle-aged women, this woman was very young. Su Fengnian's discerning eyes saw that she was the brothel keeper's daughter, commonly known as the little boss. When she saw Su Fengnian, she was in high spirits and obediently snuggled up to him. Su Fengnian did not take advantage of the situation to take advantage of her. He pinched a piece of silver with 2 fingers and threw it into the white and tender cleavage between the woman's bright red silk tube top. He smiled and said that he wanted 2 musicians who could play music and not some courtesan. The little boss was very happy. In her line of work, there were 2 kinds of bastards that she was most afraid of. The first kind was those whose family background was neither high nor low. They were not rich, but they could still afford to enjoy themselves for 10 to 15 months. They were half a bucket of water, and as soon as they arrived at the brothel, they would start to show off, wishing that they could buy all the girls in the brothel. The second kind was those who did not have much money, but could not be considered the son of an official. Not only did they rely on their family background to eat and drink for free, they also liked to cause trouble. In the end, if they could not solve the trouble, they would only give the brothel a hard time. The gray-haired young master in front of her was very heartwarming. He was generous and tactful. Because he spent money on the courtesans, the amount of money he spent was not much less than those popular courtesans. Moreover, he could also increase the popularity of the courtesans. If he was a poet or scholar with a small reputation, he could sing a few poems with the girls, and these courtesans would really become outstanding. Without needing Su Fengnian to say anything, he was invited to an elegant room on the 3rd floor. When they were going up the stairs, the graceful little head's slender waist swayed more vigorously than usual. In her mind, if this elegant young master wanted her to accompany him, even if she offered a lower price, it would not be a big deal. Most of the men in Bailiang were strong and rough. With his appearance and temperament, which was similar to that of a scholar from a Jiangnan aristocratic family. In the end, she should be the one to take advantage of the job. When the young master reached the 3rd floor, he asked for a room facing the street. She kindly reminded him that it would be a little noisy here, but he dismissed it with a laugh. The little head was also happy to go with the flow. If the guest was willing to spend money in vain, she could not cry and shout to stop him. She pushed open the door and entered. In the room, there was already a young courtesan waiting for business. Before she went out to call for another guest, a young master with a pair of red phoenix eyes tugged on her sleeve. Without batting an eyelid, he asked her to hold a banknote. He smiled and said, "What's with riding a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey?" The little head's eyes jumped with joy. She knew the answer, so she teased the young master and asked him what he meant by riding a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey. But that young master did not overdo it. He did not say the word ride, which slightly tickled her heart. However, this kind of small ripple came and went in a hurry. It was much faster than many people with silver spears and wax heads taking off their pants and putting on their pants. Su Fengnian did not sit down. Su Yanbing went out of the room and closed the door. He stood at the door with his eyes closed and focused. Huyen Guanin's back was almost leaning against the wall. She was wearing a large mink hat as she stared fixedly at her own boots. The young manager's eyes were sharp. How could he not recognize that this was a woman? Bailiang had always had an open culture. Women were not only experts in riding horses, drawing bows and hunting. Some bold and unrestrained women would not only pay to invite the courtesans into their manors to sing, they also dared to personally come to the brothel for a stroll. Some of the more bold and unrestrained women would not only pay to invite the courtesans into their manors to sing, they would also dare to personally come to the brothel for a stroll. Some of the more unique and gluttonous women had long been accustomed to this sight in larger brothels. There was a slightly aged courtesan in the Peach Cheeks brothel who would be invited by a widow in Lingzhou to grind a mirror every few days. Every time she returned, she would still be radiant and radiant. The young manager privately asked her how she felt, and the courtesan would reply with the word, "Excellent." Then, everything would be revealed without a word. This almost caused the young manager's heart to be moved and he wanted to give it a try. Unfortunately, the courtesan said that the unattainable widow liked women of the same age as her. Only then did the young manager resentfully give up. Taking advantage of the slender and handsome young master admiring a clear bottle with a few winter-sweet flowers, the young leader introduced herself as Chao Zhuan. Not to mention in a brothel, this was a vulgar name that was considered rare anywhere. She also introduced the girl who had a good relationship with her as Snowsuit. There was a bamboo cage in the room with a parrot whose feathers were as white as snow. While Chao Zhuan was talking, Su Fengnian touched the opening of the bottle. Then, he tilted his head and tapped the mysterious cyan bottle with his finger. Not only did Chao Zhuan find it interesting, but even Snowsuit, who was obviously not familiar with serving customers, also had a look of surprise in her eyes. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Living in a brothel, they had seen many rough men who reeked of alcohol. They had seen many old men whose bodies were soft and fleshy but had lecherous looks. They had even seen many scholars who were gentle and refined when opening the door and closing the door impatiently. This young master who had the patience to make things difficult for a cheap bottle behind closed doors was very amusing to them. Huyen Guanin extended a finger and gently lifted her mink hat. Seeing that he did not do anything that she did not know whether to say was dissolute or vulgar, she, who was sullen, snorted softly, but her mood was slightly better. Su Fengnian, who had his eyes fixed on the bottle as soon as he entered, exhaled and winked at the 3 women in the room. Then, he tapped the slender neck and the round body of the bottle. He smiled at Chao Zhuan and said, "Listen, 1 bell and 1 chime. If you carefully distinguish them, you can tell that the sounds are very distinct. This is a bottle produced by the Dongyue Imperial Kiln. Not to mention the whole bottle, even a fingernail-sized fragment is more expensive than gold or jade. The reason why it is so priceless, other than the scarcity of porcelain produced by this kiln, is because of the sound of the bell." In the Book of Music, Sage Zhang wrote a very famous sentence. When a gentleman hears the sound of the bell, he thinks of the military officials in danger. When he hears the sound of the bell, he thinks of the officials in charge of the border. How could Chao Zhuan believe in the Dongyue Imperial Kiln's gallbladder bottle? She also did not know what a scholarly gentleman's bell was. She only thought that he was a man who flaunted his knowledge. She threw a coquettish glance at him and smiled tenderly. "Young master, Did you come to visit a brothel or to knock on a bottle? If you want it, go ahead and take it. If Chao Juan frowns in the slightest, Chao Juan and Snowsuit will recommend themselves to you when you come to Peach Cheek's house. They will even give you money every time. Su Fengnian smiled and shook his head. He took out all the banknotes, rolled them into a ball, and gently threw them into another flower vase. It's up to you to believe it or not. In any case, I only have this much money on me. If I take the bottle, I can live with my conscience. Chao Juan suddenly widened her eyes and said, "Young master, you're not joking?" Su Fengnian sat down and asked with a smile, "Are you regretting it?" Chao Juan hesitated for a moment, then laughed heartily and said, "What's there to regret? If young master didn't say it, sooner or later, it would have been broken by that clumsy girl. I would just take a dustpan and dump it on the street. Maybe someone would even think it was a hindrance. However, since young master is penniless, Chao Juan won't ask for an extra copper coin tonight. But young master must promise to come to Peach Cheek's house often to visit my little sister Snowsuit. Is that all right?" By the time she finished speaking, Chao Juan was already glued to Su Fengnian's body. The two of them sat on the same chair. He sat on the chair and she sat on his lap. They didn't delay each other. Chao Juan had a graceful figure. Her full breasts were cleverly rubbed together. Her charming face was full of charm. Su Fengnian patted her leg and motioned for her to get up without hurting her feelings. He squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "I'm not from Lingzhou, so it will be difficult for me to come to Peach Cheek's house in the future. However, I have a few friends who are doing well in Lingzhou. If Peach Cheek's house wants to move to the county capital or meets with some trouble in Huangnam County, I can ask them to help say a few words. Of course, you didn't believe me when I said that the porcelain bottle was worth 1,000 taels of gold. You can choose not to believe me this time." After Chao Juan got up, she didn't care about pretending to be reserved anymore. She was afraid that there wouldn't be another opportunity like this. She hurriedly and carefully asked, "Young master made friends in Lingzhou's county capital. Chao Juan doesn't dare to have extravagant hopes to associate with them and doesn't dare to disturb them. However, may I ask who is the son of an aristocratic family in Huangnam County? Our Peach Cheek's house is willing to worship him like a bodhisattva." Chapter 905. Su Fengnian glanced at the window from the corner of his eyes. The Peach Cheeks building was only slightly shorter than the largest brothel in Lingzhou. Looking from here, it was clear at a glance. If the porcelain bottle fell into the hands of someone who knew its value, it would be impossible to get it without 2,000 to 3,000 taels of silver. Su Fengnian was always in a good mood when doing business. No matter if it was a big business that made him a lot of money or a small business that made him a pitiful few copper coins. It had been a few years since he went to a brothel. Furthermore, after being in love for so many years, he only had the part of being absurd and prodigal. It was the first time that he had made money, so it was a good sign. This made Su Fengnian not have any ill feelings towards Chao Juan's scheming. After sifting through the names in his mind, he knew that with the Peach Cheeks building's little boss's vision, she was coincidentally from Lingzhou in Huangnam County. Not to mention that Su Fengnian did not know any of them. Even if he knew a few of them, they would only be laughed at by her. However, Li Hanlin, who grew up in Huangnam County, did not dare to bring a few of them to embarrass himself in front of him. The few that he brought to Liangzhou were more beautiful and enchanting than women. They were all young Master Li's old sweethearts. This made Su Fengnian feel a little troubled. Could it be that he could only bring up Song Yan, official song? However, if this was the case, it would be quite interesting if it spread out. He believed that even if it reached Governor Song's ears, the newly promoted governor of Lingzhou could only pinch his nose and accept it. Su Fengnian resisted the urge to throw a bucket of dirty water at Song Yan with great difficulty because he inadvertently remembered one of Li Hanlin's enemies. Back then, that guy had been dealt with miserably by Li Hanlin, the #1 young ruffian in Feng Province. After Liang was established, Feng Province merged with Lingzhou, and the Li family moved to Lingzhou's capital. That foppish playboy finally had a chance to live. Although his father's official rank had always been suppressed by the administrator, at least he didn't have to live in fear all day long. Especially after Li Hanlin joined the army, he was completely reborn. He didn't care about these old grudges at all. That guy didn't feel ashamed of the miserable situation he had encountered back then and instead felt proud. Whenever he met someone, he would say that he had fought with Li Hanlin and Li Biaozhang from the Purple Diao Street in the north all the way to the Strawcoat Street in the south. Did anyone dare? Perhaps when the Li family moved to Lingzhou, there were still people who dared to say a few words. However, when Li Hanlin chopped off a bunch of barbarians' heads at the border, no one dared to have such courage. Su Fengnian had gone to Huangnam County to walk in the spring with Li Hanlin and his brothers. He had barely seen that poor guy once, but he didn't even greet him. He didn't know if that guy still had a memory of him. Therefore, Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Huangnam County's meritorious Governor Wang's son, Wang Yunshu. He has some friendship with me." When he said this name, not only did Chao Zhuan's eyes change, even the artist, Snowsuit, who was far less experienced than the little leader, was somewhat afraid. There was no other reason. This Grand Master Wang was too domineering in Huangnam County. It could be said that he had a well-known reputation. As soon as the administrator's son, Na Shan, left, Wang Yunshu called himself the king. His father, as the meritorious officer of the county, assisted the governor Song Yan and was in charge of the selection of the Department of Administration. That meant that he grasped the lifeline of the promotion of officials. It could be said that he held the power of life and death in his hands. Moreover, Wang Gongchao had an adopted son who was about the same age as him. It was not known whether the Wang family had arranged things well or that the adopted son was really lucky at the border. When he returned to Huangnam County, he became the commandant of 400 soldiers. As a result, some of the gang leaders with many martial arts schools had to call him brother in front of others and beg for mercy behind others. The reason why Chao Zhuan of Peach Cheek's brothel was so attentive was mainly because young Master Wang was a big benefactor of their brothel. The Shiitake Inn on the street in Huangnam County had once annoyed young Master Wang. If it were not for the relatives of the Shiitake Inn and the administrator who sent women and money, young Master Wang would have brought people to demolish the brothel long ago. Since then, young Master Wang often came to Peach Cheek's brothel to throw money and money. Coincidentally, Wang Yunshu monopolized 2 courtesans in Peach Cheek's brothel tonight. They were having fun on the same floor, but there was some distance between them. After all, the little leader was Snowsuit, a courtesan who was close to Chao Zhuan. Her status in Peach Cheek's brothel was not high. Chao Zhuan was kind and only led some pleasing guests into this room, afraid that Snowsuit would be wronged. This was a rare tenderness in a brothel that did not know what the word friendship meant. More of them were poor young prostitutes who were forced to break their buds because they did not want to be eliminated. More of them were women who were bruised but still forced to smile. Chao Zhuan was also cruel and merciless to the women in Peach Cheek's brothel except for Snowsuit. If she did not do this, even if she was the little leader, she would not be able to stand firm. Chao Zhuan took a step forward and then stepped back. She threw a glance at Snowsuit, and the courtesan began to play the zither. Chao Zhuan then smiled and said, "What a coincidence, Master Wang is on the first floor. Is he with you?" Chao Zhuan had already regarded the child in front of her as talking nonsense. As long as he said no and casually found an excuse, Chao Zhuan would not ask the root of the matter. He came to Peach Cheek's brothel in the winter to seek pleasure, so there was no need to make a scene. Otherwise, Chao Zhuan initially had the mischievous idea of going out to invite Wang Yunshu to verify his identity. However, if she did that, it would not benefit her. After Wang Yunshu came over, he would beat the child in front of her out of the brothel. As the main culprit, Chao Zhuan would not gain any benefits, so why bother? They saw the child walk to the window and lean against the window frame. Out of Chao Zhuan and Snowsuit's expectations, his voice was warm as he said, "Just in time. I'll have to trouble Miss Chao Zhuan to go, and tell him that an old friend of his has come to Peach Cheek's brothel in Lingzhou's capital." Chao Zhuan smiled and asked, "Child, then I'll really go?" Su Fengnian smiled and said, "If you don't go, then you're a puppy." Chao Zhuan's charming eyes were like silk. To think that child is a scholar and like such indecent positions. Huyen Guanyin, who had been quietly listening, felt that it was strange at first. After she came to her senses, she fiercely glared at that fellow. Su Fengnian, who had suffered an unexpected calamity, simply turned his head and looked at Shiitake Inn, which was still singing and dancing peacefully. Chao Zhuan saw that he did not seem to be joking. After quickly weighing the pros and cons, she still gathered her courage and went out to trouble the surly child Wang. Su Fengnian was quietly waiting for the turmoil in Shiitake Inn. This was because he was not very certain that the Bailiang spy would be able to achieve great success and then easily retreat unscathed. Han Shang's unexpected surprise, to the Peregrine Falcon and Eagle Guard, who were currently rushing to Huangnam County to encircle and suppress him, It was very likely that it would be a bad thing that would require many lives to make up for. Bale Young was Bale Young. Men of sacrifice were men of sacrifice. They might not always be connected to everything. This was because Han Shang's identity being exposed was not within expectations. With such an important person like him participating, there would most likely be 1 or 2 Bale Young men of sacrifice with outstanding strength to hold the fort in Huangnam County. There were not many bloody battles between spies. The side that had the initiative would win because they had a target to aim at. Everything had its vanquisher. The more accurate the plan, the better. If you had a 3rd-grade martial artist present, then I would send a 2nd-grade master to fight with you. If you had a master, then I would send 2. If you had 3, then I would not hesitate to use a 1st-grade Vajra realm martial artist to play with you. It was difficult to survive in the Jianghu. Those who were at the peak of the Jianghu were not necessarily free and unfettered. This was especially so for those who had become lackeys. They had no choice but to cherish their reputation. This was because they would never know if their next life and death battle would be a mortal enemy of the same realm or even an expert of a higher realm. These experts who stood on the opposing side, even if they were known as rare and transcendent figures, once you encountered them, once was enough. Decades of hard work, decades of martial arts training, decades of martial arts training. Even if you were in the Jianghu when you were alive, you would still end up with nothing. Of course, the battle between spies was more like Wang Tongkai and Han Shang's climbing. It relied on acting skills, adaptability, and luck. Su Fengnian listened to the melodious sound of the zither and turned to look at Huyen Guanyin, who was finally willing to approach him. She looked up and asked softly, "That sister ran in the courtyard, she likes you?" Su Fengnian laughed involuntarily and said softly, "She likes someone who is not the next king of Bailiang. Otherwise, she would have worked for Bailiang since she was 9 years old and would feel that she was not worth it. However, to be honest, if she found out that I was an ugly pighead after meeting me in Shenwu City, then she would definitely not have told me her wish when we met in the courtyard today." Huyen Guanyin raised her chin and looked away. "Then why didn't you fulfill that sister's wish? Isn't it as easy as lifting a finger?" On the way to Huangnam County, Su Fengnian, who had been separated by a thin layer of silk, had a smile on his face. She did not get an answer, but her mood was lighter than if she had gotten one. She turned around with a straight face and secretly smiled. Su Fengnian turned to look at the brothel and said in his heart, "Death warriors don't even have any thoughts. They will only die faster." The reason why he did not participate was not only because he did not want to get too involved in the spy system, but more importantly, he and Su Yambing had acted too early, making the extermination go too smoothly. Some old bastards hiding at the bottom of the quagmire would rather watch their disciples and grand-disciples die one after the other than stay in the quagmire and not be willing to rashly come ashore. Many things that could have been handled simply would often become very complicated because he was Su Fengnian. He had no choice but to consolidate at every step. Chapter 906. Su Fengnian listened to the gradually mixed sound of the zither. One of the reasons was that her fingering technique was not skillful enough. Another reason was that although this new zither was forced to use a trick, it was not possible to go to the peak of a mountain to obtain good materials, so it used an old cedar beam as the body of the zither. This was the helplessness of many poor zither masters, but this was not the problem. Many novices and even veterans who had been immersed in the zither all their lives did not realize that the body of the zither was not necessarily neat and smooth. Those who could play the zither might not be able to hack the zither, but those who could hack the zither must be good at playing the zither. When Su Fengnian was young, he did not know how many famous zither he had dissected. He found that these grooves were not as smooth as a mirror as described in the zither score. With Su Yambing outside the room, he did not have to worry about Shiitake and not knowing what was going on. Since Chao Zhuan had not invited Master Wang, Su Fengnian had nothing to do, so he walked over to Snowsuit and asked her to get up. Under the incredulous gaze of this woman, he cut the zither open. He quietly took out a flying sword from his sleeve and helped her hack the zither a little. He smiled and said, "If you break the zither, I will buy you a new one later. I still have the money." In fact, a good zither lies in the sound that wants to come out but cannot. To put it in a more vulgar way, it is like a woman taking off her clothes seductively. When she is about to take off her clothes but not completely, it always makes a man daydream. When there is nothing left. Let's not use this analogy. It will spoil the mood. What I can do now is very limited. However, when you find someone to hack the zither for you in the future, you can tell them. Snowsuit listened to this elegant young master's seemingly endless warm and mellow talk. At first, she was able to remember every word, but later, she could not help but ask with a smile, "Young master, did you really come to the Peach Cheek's house to get drunk?" Su Fengnian did not raise his head. He teased. "From beginning to end, you did not give me any wine. There was tea, but even if I drank the whole teapot, I would not get drunk." Huyen Guanyin came to the front of the bamboo birdcage and made a face at the parrot. Snowsuit was about to get the wine when Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "No need." Then, Snowsuit saw the young master carefully playing the zither. She was in a daze. Su Fengnian abruptly stood up and then sat down again. He stared blankly at the broken zither that he had personally chopped. He withdrew his gaze and closed his eyes. He tapped his forehead with a finger and murmured softly. In fact, he was constantly repeating a sentence. When things are unfair, they cry out. Snowsuit only thought that this young master had gone mad from playing the zither. That young master was still talking to himself, but his words were fragmentary. In addition, she was also frightened, so she couldn't hear him clearly. Uncle Sun Ping once said that there is a vast expanse between heaven and earth. I, too, once wandered the world in a trance. Su Fengnian reached out and tried to grab something. Then, his fingers began to draw in the air in a disorderly manner. Snowsuit moved even further away from him. Outside the room, Su Yanbing suddenly opened his eyes, as if he was facing a great enemy. As for further away, Chao Zhuan felt as if she was risking her life by knocking on Wang Yunshu's door. Inside, there was laughter and laughter. Outside the room, there was a large group of retainers. There were the armed soldiers of young Master Wang's sworn brother, as well as the direct disciples of the masters of the major gangs in Huangnam County. The way they looked at her, the little leader, was not serious. As expected, the door did not open. Only Wang Yunshu's scolding could be heard. He threatened that if anyone dared to spoil his mood, he would break the legs of the men and feed them to the dogs. As for the women, he would reward more than 10 of his subordinates. Chao Zhuan was so frightened that her voice trembled. She did not dare to push the door open. She said in a trembling voice, "Young Master Wang, I am Chao Zhuan. I have something to report. A young man from Lingzhou City just came to our Peach Cheek's house. After drinking some wine, he claimed to be young Master Wang's old friend. I don't know if it's true or not." Chao Zhuan boldly came to inform young Master Wang, just in case he is really young Master Wang's friend. She said that he drank wine, but she lamented in her heart. That young master has done his best, but this is the best he can do to smooth things over for you. Inside the house, there was a unique crisp sound of fat jiggling. Grandmaster Wang panted and scolded angrily. "Tell that guy to get out of here as soon as possible. If he comes to bother me again, I'll let you have fun with him on the street outside the Peach Cheek house." Chao Zhuan did not have a trace of luck anymore. She scolded herself for being obsessed. She hoped that Wang Yunshu would not go to Snowsuit's room to do evil. She immediately apologized and was about to leave. The unbearable noise in the room suddenly stopped. Wait a minute. Is he from Lingzhou City? Chao Gu quietly made a bitter face and wished she could slap herself. Even though Wang Yunshu was in the room and couldn't see her, she still obediently squeezed out a smile and said, "That's right, it's Lingzhou. Master Wang is wise. How is his appearance? Not bad. F***K off. If you continue to play dumb with me, do you believe that I will make you crawl in here and squat by the toilet for the entire night?" He is a rather handsome young man. Did he bring a large group of retainers? No, I only brought one. He is not as imposing as young Master Wang. He is far from being imposing. One? Yes, one is correct. What does a short-sighted woman like you know about imposing? Wait, I will go with you to take a look. The sound of clothes being worn could be heard in the room. It made Chao Zhuan despair. Chapter 907. Peach Cheek's brothel was an imitation of the southeast and the tube-shaped houses in the Miao area. There was a patio in the middle and there was no cover. It was cool in summer and snowy in winter. However, the interior of the building was divided into 2 rooms. Snowsuit's room faced the street. Like Wang Yunshu's, the 2 rooms were combined into one. It was much more spacious. There was no distinction between the inside and the outside. The interior decoration was extremely luxurious. All the items were expensive. It was far from what Qingming and Snowsuit's room could compare to. The reason why Wang Yunshu made the Peach Cheeks brothel his god of fortune was because he had a strange hobby. He liked to have sex with women who were not as beautiful as the most popular courtesans. He liked to drag them to the window railings inside to watch the rain fall. It was a feast for the eyes of many customers on the same floor. It was said that it was better to enjoy it together than to enjoy it alone. Therefore, every time young Master Wang came to the Peach Cheeks brothel, there would always be many men who heard the news and hurried over. Even if they could not share the rain and dew, they could at least reward their eyes. Obviously, the people on the same floor didn't get to enjoy it today. Fortunately, Wang Yunshu had said in private that when his father became the governor of Huangnam County, he would definitely make the two courtesans go to the window railings obediently and let everyone enjoy it. This was called a celebration. The door opened. A courtesan who had a bad relationship with the head of the building had a face full of lust. She glanced at Kusanagi from the corner of her eyes. That was a coldness that could only be understood between women. She was gloating. Chao Zhuan led young Master Wang, who was carelessly draped in a fox fur coat, and walked with difficulty. Wang Yunshu kicked Chao Zhuan's calf. "Are you lame? Or are your legs weak from being ordered around? Hurry up. If you delay my business, just you wait. I don't care if you're Mother Hong's daughter or not. Hee. If you lie about military intelligence, don't even mention it. In the army, you'll be executed. Anyway, there's no place on your body that's clean. You should have been thrown into the river and drowned in a pig cage long ago. Why would I care about you whores?" Chao Zhuan bit her lips and smiled. She didn't know who she was smiling at. Wang Yunshu brought the group of evil servants and retainers to the place of his old friend in Lingzhou that Chao Zhuan mentioned. In Huangnam County, he was a young dandy who was like the king of heaven. There was a hint of undetectable haze between his brows. That guy better not have anything to do with that Lin guy. If they were really related to him, even if he was just a small fry, he, Wang Yunshu, would never dare to hit him. Perhaps he could only obediently treat him as a distinguished guest. This wasn't because Wang Yunshu was easy to talk to. There was nothing he could do. In the rich Lingzhou, Wang Yunshu wasn't afraid of almost all the sons of officials and generals. There were only a handful of them. At most, they would mind their own business. The only one he was afraid of was that one. In terms of family background, that guy's father was a primary second-rank official. Not to mention Lingzhou, in the entire Bailiang, only the great general and the new protector of Bailiang, the great demon Chu, could suppress him. His own father was a few steps behind. In terms of skills, 100 Wang Yunshu wouldn't be able to beat him. In terms of military achievements, even someone as thick-skinned as Wang Yunshu didn't have the nerve to compete in this. As long as Wang Yunshu thought of that Li guy, his mood would become gloomier. When he saw the tall and sturdy man standing outside the house with his arms crossed, Wang Yunshu subconsciously stopped and didn't dare to move forward. This was because he felt an aura that was even scarier than when his sworn brother was angry. It was a strong sense of danger, like a cat meeting a tiger. It was true that Wang Yunshu was domineering and unreasonable, but he wasn't so stupid that he couldn't be cured. It has to be known that outside of Lingzhou, the only young master in northern Liang who was even more ferocious than the one with the surname Li set a few golden rules that everyone believed in. For example, if we wastrels want to live a long life, we have to rely on our merits, servants, brothers, and money. These are all treasured weapons that can save lives but not lives. It is better to rely on our brains to live a good life. At first, Wang Yunshu scoffed at these words. Later on, as he muddled along and suffered some hardships, he began to understand the logic behind these words. It was only when Wang Yunshu truly relied on his reputation to fall to the ground that he realized. Many of his friends fell to the ground and didn't have the chance to repent. For example, there was a good friend who went to Bailiang 2 years ago to behave atrociously outside of Bailiang. He killed women and chivalrous people. In the end, he was so arrogant that he killed soldiers. In the end, his corpse couldn't even be found. How could this friend's family background in Lingzhou be any worse than his? People with different statuses had different Jianghu in their eyes. In the Jianghu of prostitutes like Chao Zhuan and Snowsuit, Li Baisher was the leader of their Jianghu. As for wastrels like Wang Yunshu, that fellow was no different from a wastrel immortal in the Jianghu. Moreover, no one could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Where could you find a wastrel who could go to the throne room of the capital without kneeling to the emperor? Where could you find a wastrel who could bring the old god of swords to the martial emperor city? Wang Yunshu couldn't bear to see others living better lives. However, when it came to some fellows that he couldn't afford to offend, he still knew how to admit defeat. Chao Zhuan didn't find anything surprising about the retainer at the door who didn't open his eyes. He was just a little taller and more taciturn. However, when she saw the serious expression on Master Wang's face, she started to think about it. Her actions of knocking on the door and pushing it open also became lighter. However, no matter how hard Chao Zhuan pushed the door, she couldn't push it open. She thought that the door had been locked and was about to open her mouth to remind Master Wang and Snowsuit inside. The retainer slowly opened his mouth and said, "Wait." Chao Zhuan didn't mind that matter. She didn't even mind that she had a part in it. However, she was afraid that Master Wang behind her would fly into a rage. At that time, not to mention her, even the entire Peach Cheeks restaurant would be implicated. Behind Chao Zhuan, Master Wang chuckled and said, "Just wait a little longer." Chao Zhuan really felt like she was being roasted on a bonfire. Every day felt like a year. She didn't know how much time had passed. Behind her, Wang Yunshu's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. "Come in." Fortunately, 2 words came from inside the room. In Chao Zhuan's ears, there was no more heavenly voice than this in her life. The door of the house was slowly opened by Shui Yi. Wang Yunshu, who had lost his patience, stepped over the threshold with a sinister smile. He saw a person sitting behind a broken zither that he had never dreamed of. Wang Yunshu would recognize her even if she turned into ashes. Then, this big wastrel of Huangnam County made a prompt decision that even he himself admired. With lightning speed, he knelt heavily on the ground, slapped his hands on the ground, and knocked his head solidly on the ground with a bang. Wang Yunshu didn't even dare to fart. He just knelt on the ground. Even if he wasn't a land immortal, he should be at least at the level of 2nd grade master. Chao Zhuan's mouth twitched outside the room. Snowsuit in the room was even more miserable. She was so frightened that she quickly stood against the wall and covered her heart. She didn't dare to look at him again. What was even more unacceptable to Chao Gu was that the rich young master whom she had mistaken for an ordinary gentry, the one who had accepted the bow of the Grand Prince Wang, was looking at her with a faint smile while holding his cheek with one hand. Chapter 908. I'll be going abroad tomorrow, so I'll be bringing along a notebook with a pleasing font. When the time comes, I'll be posting updates and some photos on the WeChat platform. If you want to follow me, you can search for Fenghua 1985 on your phone or scan the QR code directly. You can find it on Zonghua 1985. Wang Yunshu had just finished his 2nd round with the 2 courtesans of Peach Cheeks' house. His body was already like an arrow at the end of its flight. He was trembling as he knelt, but he could only try his best not to move. He was afraid that the slightest movement would cause him to be misunderstood as having ill intentions. Fortunately, Su Fingyan smiled and said, "Yunshu, I just told Chao Zhuan that you and I have a close relationship. Although the loser of the bet last time has to kneel when they meet, you don't have to get addicted to kneeling. Get up. I heard that you're the #1 guest here. Aren't you afraid that Peach Cheeks' house will look down on you?" Chao Zhuan's mood today was fluctuating between joy and sorrow. According to her thoughts, Wang Yunshu definitely wouldn't be lying there pretending to be a dead dog because his legs suddenly went soft. The only explanation was that he was a young master from Lingzhou. It was hard to say whether he was Wang Yunshu's old friend, but his family background was definitely far superior to Wang Gongcao's in Huangnam County. If he was a son of an official of the same rank as his father, even if he had been taught an unforgettable lesson, he definitely wouldn't be so submissive to the point of prostrating himself before someone the moment they met. As a little leader, Snowsuit could hide in a daze, but she couldn't. She hurriedly sorted out her thoughts. Apart from the disrespect of sitting on the gray-haired young master's lap and rubbing his buttocks, Chao Zhuan could be considered honest. However, she was only a prostitute from Peach Cheeks' house. Most of the sons of officials were officials, and most of the sons of generals joined the army. Naturally, there would be rats that dug holes in the ground. However, Huangnam County definitely had people like her who followed their mother to become prostitutes, but they were definitely few. Su Fingyan didn't pay attention to Wang Yunshu at all. The reason why he remembered this name was because Wang Yunshu's father was not vulgar. Huangnam County's merit officer, Wang Shihua. The Wang family was a big family in Huangnam County with many ancestral shrines. However, the same family name had different ancestors. There were 4 famous families: Shuijing Wang family, Longyi Wang family, Lingling Su of Gojoseon family, and Zijin Wang family. Administrator Li Gongda was an outsider in Huangnam County. The reason why he was able to make a fortune was that he was not only the son-in-law of Longyi Wang family, but also successfully tied together the several big Wang families that were intertwined with each other. If it was said that being an official was a new illness, then the establishment of a family was an old illness that was close to being cured. Wang Yunshu was quick-witted, or else he wouldn't have been able to survive in Huangnam County. He immediately understood that His Royal Highness didn't want to reveal his identity, so he hurriedly stood up and dusted his sleeves in a serious manner. Su Fengnian stood up and gestured to Chao Zhuan to drink. There was wine in the house, but it wasn't good enough to serve young Master Wang. Chao Zhuan wanted to go to the wine cellar to get a few jars of wine that had been sealed for many years, but Su Fengnian said that green ants would do. Chao Zhuan was stunned and didn't dare to question him, but she still subconsciously glanced at Wang Yunshu. This made young Master Wang so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He silently cursed this little leader for being blind. Wasn't this setting him up? He immediately threw a fierce look at her, telling her not to be nosy. Chao Zhuan also knew that she was drawing legs on a snake and hurriedly left. Su Fengnian gestured to Wang Yunshu to sit. Wang Yunshu flatteringly shook his head and hurriedly said that standing was more comfortable. Su Fengnian still carried a chair for Wang Yunshu and stood by the window. Wang Yunshu laughed dryly as he sat down, feeling as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He recited all the names of the bodhisattvas, deities and Buddhas he knew, hoping that this bad-tempered His Royal Highness would not use peaceful means before resorting to force. In Longqing County, even Zhong Honggu had been dealt with quite a bit, so His Royal Highness could still steam and roast him whenever he wanted. Su Fengnian leaned his elbow against the window and asked, "How is Uncle Wang?" Wang Yunshu swallowed his saliva and nodded. He's fine. Su Fengnian, who had always been amiable towards Wang Yunshu, thought for a moment and smiled. Uncle Wang comes from a rare scholarly family in Beiliang. In Huangnam County, his knowledge is high, no less than that of the prefect Song Yen. It is said that there was once a Wudong Zhenren who observed his physiognomy and gave him a prophecy. What did he say? Wang Yunshu said awkwardly, that unknown old Taoist said that when my father was young, he was addicted to chivalry, riding and archery. Then he was addicted to the study of scriptures and poems. Then he was addicted to the old immortal Huang and the Western Buddhist land. In the end, he returned to being a sage. I reckon that whether or not the Taoist priest came from Wudong is another matter. I've made a fool of myself in front of your highness, young Master Su. Su Fengnian shook his head and said, when I was at Wudong Mountain, I did indeed hear such a thing. That old Taoist priest was fully deserving of his title as a Taoist immortal, the old supreme leader Wang Zhonglo. Wang Yunshu was dumbfounded. To be honest, even the Wang family did not take this prophecy seriously. They only saw it as icing on the cake. However, when his father was young, he did indeed ride a horse, carry a sword, and travel to study. He was full of chivalry. However, now that Wang Gongchao was addicted to Taoism, Wang Yunshu had never seen his father practice martial arts with a sword. He had not even seen his father ride a horse many times. As for his travel experience when he was young, Wang Gongchao had never mentioned it in front of his only son. Wang Yunshu also thought that these rumors, which his father was unwilling to talk about, were just the flattery of busybodies. Chapter 909. If it was really the old immortal who severed the Kanglin River with one finger, then it would be incredible. Wang Yunshu immediately had a higher opinion of his father, who made enemies on all sides in Lingzhou's officialdom. Not to mention other things, just the fact that he did not see eye to eye with the administrator made Wang Yunshu feel that his future in this life was bleak. Wang Yunshu's ability to observe people's expressions was even more perfect than Chao Zhuan's. When His Royal Highness talked about the old Wudong leader, his eyes and expression were very gentle, and it was not the kind of feminine softness that made others feel cold in their bones. Of course, Wang Yunshu did not know that between the two mountains, Wudong Mountain and Qingliang Mountain, it could be said that even an immortal sword could not sever it. The green ant wine that everyone was fond of was readily available in Beiliang. Chao Zhuan quickly brought 4 pots. Su Fengnian and Wang Yunshu naturally took 2 pots. Chao Zhuan asked for 1 pot herself. Snowsuit was not good at drinking, so the last pot was given to the woman in the mink hat who was pretending to be a servant in green. When she handed the wine over, Chao Juan was suddenly stunned. There was such a beautiful person in the world? Could it be that she could compete with Xiangfan City's Li Shuangjia? Su Yanbing had already closed the door and became a door god who did not show his emotions. Su Fengnian held the small wine pot with 2 fingers and gently shook it. He asked mischievously, "Do you still hate Li Hanlin now?" Wang Yunshu drank a mouthful of wine to calm himself down. He had never touched the green ant wine before, but when he drank with His Royal Highness, not to mention the barely tasted green ant, even the dregs of the wine would give rise to the feeling of getting drunk. When he suddenly heard this sentence, Wang Yunshu's weak point, he almost spat out the mouthful of wine. He quickly swallowed the mouthful of strong wine. The wine went down his stomach, but his heart was in his throat again. He carefully smiled bitterly and said, "How would I dare? Young Master Li has already made a name for himself on the border. Don't talk about holding a grudge. If young Master Li comes to Huangnam County to pay respects to his ancestors, I will lead his horse for him." However, before young Master Li left Huangnam County, he said that if he ever sees me again, he will beat me up until even my father won't recognize me. Even if Wang Yunshu wants to apologize, I really don't dare to go to young Master Li and be beaten up. Chao Juan thought that she had grasped the mystery. This young man from Lingzhou must have some kind of relationship with the administrator's son, Li Hanlin. He might even be a relative of the administrator. This was why Wang Yunshu was scared out of his wits. Su Fengnian nodded as if he believed Wang Yunshu. He casually asked, "I heard that you have a sworn brother who is a military officer in Huangnam County. He is in charge of a battalion of soldiers and horses. He has 300 to 400 armored soldiers under his command. All of them are light cavalry, and their war horses are all B grade. They wouldn't be bad even if they were placed on the border of Yuliang. They are far more elite and skilled in battle than the military officers in the county?" Wang Yunshu scratched his head and chuckled. He grinned and said with an honest face, "They are just for show. Of course, they are good-looking. If they really go to the border and fight with the barbarians, I don't think they will be good. They are all new soldiers who have never fought before. However, to be honest, many of them are the direct disciples of the gangs in Huangnam County. They are not good at fighting, but they are good at fighting. Since young Master Su has asked about these family scandals, I can only tell the truth. If there is anything wrong, young Master Su can tell Wang Yunshu. I will explain it to my father and my sworn brother. In any case, I can guarantee that everything will go according to young Master Su's wishes." Chao Juan, who heard every word, was even more surprised. Could it be that this young master from Lingzhou was not as simple as just a descendant of the Li family? Otherwise, how could he give orders to Huangnam County's military and politics? The conflict between rich playboys would break the sky and fight with each other. The 2 groups of people would invite immortals to fight until the sky was dark. The worst-case scenario would be the soldiers in bright armor being their accomplices. There was no reason for it to be serious enough to shake the foundation of the family. In the impression of the head of the Peach Cheeks house, there really was no young second generation from Huangnam County who could surpass their parents and challenge those old foxes in the officialdom. Huangnam County was Baoyang's granary. The officials who could abuse their power here were not simple. Governor Song Yan's methods were swift and fierce, and Wang Gongchao was also famous for being watertight. It could be said that all of them were like a hornet's nest. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "There are too many rich people in Huangnam County. However, many of them can't find a temple even if they carry a pig's head. In the end, it's because they don't have enough ability." Back then, when they fought for the position of governor of Fengzhou, it wasn't Uncle Wang who lost to the administrator. It was the Wang family from the water school who lost to the Wang family from Longyi. They were suppressed by the administrator for so many years that they couldn't even become the governor of Huangnam County. Then they were ostracized by Song Yan, who was 1 rank higher than them. It was already not easy for them to be able to sit on the fishing platform and firmly hold the power to distribute the county official's hat. Now, Governor Song is finally going to move from Huangnam County to Lingzhou to be the governor. Wang Yunshu's expression was complicated. Did His Royal Highness want his father to take a step forward? Su Fengnian didn't keep Wang Yunshu in suspense. He directly explained the stakes to Wang Yunshu. However, the position of governor still has to be filled by an official from the Wang family from Longyi. The rules in the officialdom are passed down from generation to generation. They can't be broken just because they want to. Otherwise, they'll be hated too much. What I'm curious about right now is whether or not your sworn brother has any real ability. Wang Yunshu gritted his teeth and said, "That's my sworn brother." At this point, he glanced at Chao Zhuan, who was listening attentively. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Miss Chao Zhuan, you and Snowsuit go exchange for some fresh food." Once the outsiders left, Wang Yunshu immediately stood up and carefully worded his words. "Your Highness, my sworn brother is called Jiao Wui. He has some ability and has made a lot of military achievements at the border of Yuzhou. Unfortunately, he was framed by his colleagues. Not only did my father lose more than 10,000 taels of silver, my sworn brother almost didn't make it back to Huangnam County alive. However, our Wang family admits to this grudge. Wang Yunshu won't complain to your Highness. My sworn brother Jiao Wui often drowned his sorrows in Huangnam County in the past few years, but he didn't lose his martial arts. During this time, he often led the soldiers to the river to cut ice and had them jump into the river to freeze. If they couldn't endure it, they had to leave. I'm not trying to deceive your Highness by saying good things about my sworn brother, but I've never seen such a ferocious commandant." Su Fengnian smiled and said, "If you go to the border and take a look, you'll know that it's nothing." Wang Yunshu's face immediately turned red. He said embarrassedly, "Your Highness, please don't blame me. Wang Yunshu is short-sighted." Su Yanbing coughed softly. Almost at the same time, Su Fengnian waved his hand at Wang Yunshu. Then he turned around and stood by the window, looking at the Shiitake Inn. Chapter 9-10. Su Fengnian stood by the window. He turned his head and waved at the confused Wang Yunshu. After he came closer, he said softly, "Go and tell your sworn brother that for your sake, I'll allow him to lead the army into the city. There's a good opportunity for him to earn military merits without doing any work." Wang Yunshu rubbed his hands vigorously and said eagerly, "Your Highness, can I also join in the fun?" Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "Do you have the status of a soldier?" Wang Yunshu also confessed. He blushed and said, Yes. My father wants to save face. He thinks that I'm not doing my job properly. He takes me out to meet his colleagues during festivals, which makes him lose face. So, he asked my sworn brother for the position of a small squad leader." Su Fengnian said playfully, "A small squad leader? That's a position that can only be obtained by killing barbarians at the border." Young Master Wang was horrified. He laughed dryly and didn't know how to salvage the situation. Su Fengnian didn't care about it. He waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and discuss with your sworn brother. When the time comes, you don't have to come to Peach Cheek's restaurant. Let the Jiao Wui army split into two. You and him will go to Qing Rong Temple and Liantang respectively. If the city gate asks, say that it's Governor Song Yan's order. If anyone asks, say that it's me who asked you to go." Wang Yunshu said goodbye and ran out of Peach Cheek's restaurant with the retainers and evil slaves in the corridor. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, Chao Zhuan and Snowsuit, who were a little further away, looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know what was going on. Su Yanbing walked to the window and looked at Shiitake Inn. He smiled and said, "Congratulations to your Highness for your enlightenment while playing the zither." Su Fengnian nodded and lamented, "The world only knows that there are big mistakes in the false realm, but it seems that there are also good times when there are mistakes." Su Yanbing shook his head and said, "His Royal Highness's fake realm is like a painting that a collector would like to borrow for a look. The collector would uncover a corner of the painting and then quickly take it back. This kind of fake realm is obviously less harmful than the artist's own painting going astray. Furthermore, what His Highness has comprehended this time is not the profound finger of inquiring immortality, but the vast azure heavenly phenomenon. This was due to His Highness 20 years of studying, as well as what he had seen and heard in his 3 travels. Reading 10,000 books, traveling 10,000 miles, was the reason why scholars passed down from generation to generation and had to travel 10,000 miles. Only by doing so would one be able to accumulate sufficient strength and achieve success at a certain point in time. However, what Su Yanbing said is all theoretical. His Highness was able to comprehend the essence of the heavenly phenomenon even after experiencing the false realm and falling realm. Even Su Yanbing admits that he is unable to do so. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Uncle Su, you are someone who is about to transcend the mortal world and enter the divine world. Don't put in good words for me, a second-level internal force half-baked guy." Su Yanbing dismissed it with a smile. Su Fengnian muttered in his heart, The realm he had just touched upon was too ethereal and mysterious, but it did not seem to be the profound finger or the heavenly phenomenon. It was as if with a hook of his finger, he could make some objects that seemed to be close to him but were actually thousands of miles away break through the air and arrive. However, this kind of realm was fleeting and was not reliable. As for how to grasp the details, it would depend on his future opportunities. Ever since the betrayal of Black Carp in Huangnam County and the secret cooperation of Hanshang, an old spy with a high position in Beimang, the spy network in the county was rotten. The more experienced a person was, the easier it was for them to be exposed. The spy circle had a habit of catching pairs. They were catching pairs between friends and enemies after their identities were exposed, and they were also catching pairs between people of the same camp. However, the latter was usually only the important literary spies who had reached a certain position had the qualifications to be watched and protected by military spies. Many literary spies did not know who had died for them in their entire lives. Often, they would only be informed of someone's death when they had to evacuate in an emergency. Hanshang was undoubtedly an important part of Beimang's infiltration into Bailiang's granary. With a literary spy like Hanshang, whose martial arts cultivation did not match his identity, naturally, there would be the old bastard that Su Fengnian had mentioned lurking at the bottom of the quagmire. However, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. No one knew what surprises would be in the 3 nests. In this secret assassination, the Eagle Guard was mainly responsible for Qingrong Temple, where there were relatively few spies. The peregrine falcon was to peck at the fat meat of the entire lotus pond. There were orders from the higher-ups that they could not kill by mistake but not by mistake. These 2 groups of Bailiang killers were very powerful and required a lot of energy, material, and manpower to deal with. Therefore, these 2 groups of men of sacrifice not only wore soft armor and short knives, but also carried bows and crossbows. Shiitake-in was the least valued of the 3 groups. Some of the miscellaneous people, with low ranks, were thrown here. Both the peregrine falcon and the Eagle Guard were sent here. The competition between them was inevitable. Hong Shuwen and Ren Shanyu were in this group. Ren Shanyu was only one of the 2 small leaders. There was also an old man whose name had been forgotten. He was used to calling him Old Tree Stump. It was said that he had been a man of sacrifice in Bailiang for many years. However, until today, he had never been to Bailiang Palace, let alone seen the general at close range. He had the air of an old-fashioned man of Jianghu. Chapter 9-11. The manager of the Peregrine Falcon was a sloppy middle-aged man whose surname was Song. This time, other than the 2 groups of people who were on the lookout and hunting down the fish that slipped through the net, there were 6 people who entered Shiitake-in. This man with the surname Song pretended to be a rich man from another place, and wore a thick gold chain that weighed several kilograms around his neck. Hong Shuwen was his bad friend and Ren Shanyu was Master Song's private foxy woman. The other 3 people were the elites of the Peregrine Falcon. They wore retainer outfits and didn't carry any weapons, but they all had daggers and short hooks hidden inside. Before entering Shiitake-in, they had roughly communicated with each other about what they were good at and what kind of weapons they used. Being men of sacrifice was not a joke. No one was allowed to be a hero alone. Once there was a battle that was roughly evenly matched, whether there was cooperation or skillful cooperation, the outcome would be completely different. It might even be the difference between life and death. Chai Filu's main target was a woman who had recently become the most popular courtesan. She wasn't necessarily more beautiful than the previous courtesans, but men liked the new and disliked the old. This made her business seem particularly good. Tonight, a lord from Fengyang County spent 700 taels to get her out of the competition, which meant that she would have to spend the night outside. However, he had underestimated the market for courtesans in Shiitake-in. As soon as he heard that this lord from Fengyang County was going to be kicked out, someone immediately offered 600 taels. The old man had no choice but to ask for 100 taels back and give up on the idea of being kicked out of the competition. He had no choice but to leave a beautiful maidservant in a private residence outside. According to the spy report that Wang Tongke had unearthed, the procuress in Chai Filu who was responsible for matchmaking between the boss and the rich and powerful was also a spy who was born in Bailiang but turned to Beimang halfway through. In addition, the guard instructor and several fellow apprentices of this brothel were real Beimang's men of sacrifice. There were a total of 8 or 9 people in Chai Filu, and only half of them were capable of risking their lives. Therefore, everyone was an expert. The Peregrine Eagle Guard, 16 or 17 people coordinated from inside and outside, so there was no suspense. In fact, it was indeed very smooth at the beginning. The leader of the Peregrine Eagle, Song-gu, and Ren Shanyu went to a room that had been booked long ago. It happened that the top floor of the building was the room where the courtesan received her guests. He called for a half-famous courtesan. The brothel did not reject the guests who brought their own women, but it was not easy to let a famous courtesan play with a stranger. Even if the courtesan herself was willing, the brothel would most likely reject it. This was because they were afraid that the value of the famous courtesan that they had painstakingly raised would fall after making a fuss. Therefore, without a high price, it was impossible to invite her. Hong Shuwen, who was hired by Song-gu, got a big bag of silver. He kept pestering the brothel keeper and shamelessly asked her to make an exception for him. In fact, Hong Shuwen was not bad-looking. He was a disciple of a rich family in Baelyang, and he killed people to show his heroic spirit. The woman, who was about 27 or 28 years old, might have taken a fancy to this guy. Even though Hong Shuwen's money was not enough for her, she still agreed. However, she was a brothel keeper in Shiitake Inn and had countless trivial matters to deal with. So she asked Hong Shuwen to be more efficient and finish the job quickly. Hong Shuwen agreed with a smile and exposed his shortcomings. He said that he was famous for riding fast, which made the woman look at him coquettishly. The spring night was short, and no one thought that life was too long. Little by little, the 3 peregrine falcons, who were familiar with the terrain of Shiitake Inn, found the guards who were drinking in the small courtyard and killed them without saying a word. On an embroidered bed, the woman who sensed the killing intent wanted to break Hong Shuwen's spine with her hand. As a result, Hong Shuwen hit her dantian first, and then his 5 fingers were like hooks, strangling her white and tender neck. He watched her die little by little and said with a smile, "I have to take the money back later. We slept together because we liked each other. What's the matter with spending money to buy sex?" Almost at the same time, Song-gu was admiring the sight of a prostitute stripping. He walked up behind her, and she turned around to look at him with a smile. Song-gu smiled and covered her mouth with his hand. He then punched her in the chest, and killed her on the spot. Ren Shanyu, who had been impatient for a long time, jumped on the table, tiptoed, and stuck to the ceiling like a gecko. After confirming the movement upstairs, she tore the plank with her hands and found the position of the spy prostitute. She only saw a charming scene. The woman's clothes were half taken off and her hands were on the table, revealing a large part of her snow-white fat under her waist. An old man in luxurious clothes was raising his hand and was about to slap the 2 pieces of fat. Seeing Ren Shanyu appear out of nowhere, the old man was obsessed with lust and was not too frightened. Instead, he looked at Ren Shanyu's soft breasts with a playful smile. However, the Shiitake Inn prostitute with a perky but had a strong murderous look in her eyes. Instead of lifting her skirt and putting on her clothes, she slapped the table and twisted her 5 fingers slightly. She was like a gorgeous butterfly, spinning toward the uninvited guest Ren Shanyu. The female eagle guard, who did not carry a pair of Xianhua broad axes, was about to block when an arm appeared from the floor. It grabbed the prostitute's slender ankle and pulled it down hard. She was dragged downstairs and disappeared without a trace. Ren Shanyu's face was full of anger. She had a deep grudge against Song-gu. Originally, she planned to assassinate the prostitute, Song-gu to deal with the Shiitake Inn brothel, and Hong Shuwen to support the 3 peregrine falcons. However, Song-gu let Hong Shuwen do the hard work and stayed in the room. The prostitute in the same room did not need to die at all. She only needed to be knocked out. Just when Ren Shanyu was in a trance, the gentleman from the neighboring county, who came back to his senses, quietly stretched out his hand. His palm was facing up, under the table, and he gently lifted the table. The table quickly spun and smashed toward Ren Shanyu. With a sudden murderous intent, Ren Shanyu kicked out and broke the heavy hardwood table. Then she saw an old and gloomy face getting closer and closer. She was hit on the forehead by a palm. Her petite body directly broke through the wall and was slapped out of the building. When she was about to fall on the street, Ren Shanyu, whose consciousness was getting more and more blurred, regretted. If she had the pair of axes in her hands, maybe she would not be so useless. Chapter 9:12. The Taoist temple was the place where Taoism was observed. The monk was the person who left the world. The Taoist temple observed Taoism honestly, and the monks left the world dutifully. They should not be too involved in the world. Don't forget, this was Baelyang. The culprit who once turned the people of Jianghu into rats was either patrolling the border or watching Baelyang coldly from Mount Qingliang. Huangnam County's Qingrong Temple was famous in Baelyang for its towering ancient trees. The path to the temple was covered with greenery. It was the best place for the county officials and dignitaries to escape from the summer heat. As the Bailiang Palace was built on Mount Qingliang, Qingrong Temple also had the reputation of being cool. Qingrong Temple had always had a deep relationship with the officials of Huangnam County. For example, Wang Shihua, who worshipped Elder Huang, even though he did not have a teacher, he worshipped Taoist Qing Huai as his teacher. Moreover, this old Taoist was Wang Shihua's political enemy, Governor Song Yen, for many years. Song Yen did not alienate his relationship with Qingrong Temple just because Wang Shihua worshipped this Taoist as his teacher. Now that Li Yang had destroyed Buddhism, only Bailiang's Taoism was close to Buddhism. Many monks rushed into Bailiang to seek refuge. Qingrong Temple also opened its escape from the summer heat door. Most of them did not refuse. Fortunately, Qingrong Temple was prosperous. Otherwise, it would be eaten by so many mouths. Among the monks who stayed in Qingrong Temple, the most famous one was monk Huang Deng of Gangnam-do. In this half a year, the monk and the Taoist had been learning from each other. Both sides debated Buddhism and Taoism and did not close the door. This made the scholars of Huangnam County scramble for it, regardless of whether they could understand it or not. At night, the Taoist temple's night sky was green and close to ink. Only a lantern was hung in one place. The light was dim and there were two unfamiliar songs alternating. At first, it sounded barren and out of tune, but if one listened carefully, one might be able to taste something unique. The old Taoist had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He held a horsetail whisk in his arms and sat on the ground with his back leaning against a pillar. He was none other than Taoist Qing Huai, an expert in the Zhai Jiao Kui. There was an old monk clapping his hands beside him. He was humming a line: snatch the swallow's mud, shave the Buddha's golden makeup, slice the mosquito's leg meat. He was none other than Yellow Lamp Zen Master, who had drifted from Gangnam-do to Bailiang during the Buddha annihilation catastrophe. The two old men looked at each other and smiled. Monk Huang Deng asked softly, "My old friend Qing Huai, I heard in Gangnam-do that there was a Guqin belonging to the Lei family of Shishu in Qingrong Temple. Back then, the Lei family followed the king of the fallen country to his death. The hundreds of Guqins that the family had kept were all smashed to pieces. I wonder if this Guqin can still be played?" The old Taoist said regretfully, "When I got my hands on it, more than half of the Rao Jianlei had already been burned. Not a single string was left. Every time the remnants of Shishu looked at it with tears in their eyes." Monk Huang Deng sighed. The rise and fall of fate. The old Taoist raised his head and looked at the lantern hanging high. He suddenly laughed and said, "Isn't there a competition between Buddhism and Taoism?" The old monk nodded. After a moment of silence, he asked, "What do you think of the Lord of Bailiang?" The Taoist spoke without hesitation. He said, "Of course he has made great contributions. According to the system of our dynasty, there are 6 categories of contributions: founding the country, quelling difficulties, capturing rebels, suppressing the vassals, resisting the barbarians, and conquering the barbarians. The king of Bailiang, Su Shao, has 5. His contributions are more than just the lord's. However, as a subject, if the lord wants the subject to die, the subject is disloyal." The old monk smiled calmly. The Taoist was looking at the big red lantern, while the monk was looking at a string of wind chimes that were mute even though there was no wind. There was a buzzing sound. Although it sounded like there was only one sound, there were more than 40 crossbow arrows shooting towards the eaves. The old Taoist furrowed his brows, but he didn't withdraw his gaze. With a flick of his horsetail whisk, he wrapped a few crossbow bolts in the white strands of the whisk. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he pretended to use the crossbow bolts to knock against the crossbow bolts. He actually managed to block the rain of arrows outside the eaves. 2 armored soldiers came out of the shadows, one in front and one behind. When they were 10 steps away from the corridor, they changed into a bunch of arrows that flew over the soldiers' heads. The old Taoist stood up. He held the horsetail whisk in one hand and the white silk in the other. He pulled out most of it and threw it into the air. The old Taoist, who was good at observing qi, focused more on the soldiers behind him. The eagle guard was covered in iron armor. His body was as graceful as a woman's, which made him look very unique. Taoist Qing Huai, who was already at the peak of grade 2, had been stuck in a state where he wanted to break through but couldn't. For cultivators, as long as they broke through to the master realm, most of them would reach the mystic realm as soon as they reached grade 1. This was also why Dao sect masters were called Little Taoist masters. However, Taoist Qing Huai never showed his strength to outsiders. Even when he did show his strength, he was still around grade 3. Therefore, in Huangnam County, he was only known for his research on Taoist techniques. Taoist Qing Huai used the Dipper steps. Just as the hidden talisman formation was about to be activated, a Buddhist chant sounded. Taoist Qing Huai's face turned cold. He climbed from grade 3 to grade 2. He shouted softly. The iron horse wind chimes jingled and the big red lantern swayed. The old monk chanted again, but the talisman formation was still unable to be activated. At this time and place, the Tao was 1 foot tall and the Buddha was 10 feet tall. Taoist Qing Huai finally stopped hiding his strength. His entire Taoist robe puffed up like a ball. However, the old monk had already closed his eyes. The old monk entered a meditative state and listened to the gentle sound of the bells. The leading soldier stepped onto the corridor and broke through the aura shield with one strike. The price was huge. His entire body was covered in blood. He didn't care about his face and cut open the Taoist's abdomen. His other hand held the hilt of the sword and increased his strength. He charged forward and knocked Taoist Qing Huai, who was determined to multitask, into the wall. The tip of the sword didn't just pierce through the old Taoist's body, it even went a few inches out of the wall. The soldier who was close to the diamond body spat out a mouthful of blood. He raised his arm and wiped the blood off his face. The armored soldier behind spoke. Her voice was clear and crisp. She should be a young woman. Wutongin's secret order allows you to change Qing Rong Temple into a temple. The old monk put his palms together and chanted, Amitba. Chapter 9:13. The general wanted to test the young man's internal energy, so he continued to gallop forward on his horse for 30 li. In the blink of an eye, he had already caught up with the general, and the two of them were actually riding side by side. The general wanted to test the young man's internal energy, so he continued to gallop forward on his horse for 30 li. The wanderer also followed the general for 30 li without showing any signs of fatigue. The general saw him as a talent and allowed him to establish a sect in his territory. Lotus Pond vaguely became one of the top 3 sects in Feng province at that time. However, following the general's death, this sect leader's personality was perverse, and his martial skill was not high. When he clashed with others, he would either die or be injured. Only then did he move to the neighboring Huangnam County. These years, he had been supporting the sect by himself. When he reached 40 years of age, his temperament changed, and he gradually began to stand firm. However, Lotus Pond was still not as prosperous as it was in the past. Fortunately, in these years, he had accepted a few in-name disciples with good innate abilities. These young talents probably learned from their master's mistakes and were good at interacting with officials in the county. Thus, they reluctantly helped Lotus Pond expand in Huangnam County. Do Yongguan, who had nothing better to do, entered Lotus Pond at this time. He could be considered to be from a well-off family. Since he was young, he liked to fight for power and ruthlessly. However, if he wanted to become a genuine expert, logically speaking, he shouldn't even think about going bankrupt. Once, when the direct disciple of Lotus Pond's sect leader went out to travel, he was surrounded and beaten up by several major sects within the county. The hot-blooded Do Yongguan risked his life to save him and escorted him all the way from the border of Huangnan County to Lotus Pond. Zhang Su originally wanted to give him 500 taels of silver to settle the matter, but Do Yongguan knelt on the ground for a day and a night, begging to be allowed to enter the sect. Zhang Su refused and coldly said that his talent was mediocre. To the men of Jianghu, this was tantamount to a death sentence. However, Do Yongguan was also a person who would go to a dead end. He would rather not give up the silver that was envied by ordinary people, and only wanted to be allowed to squat on the martial arts field of Lotus Pond's outer sect for a month. A month later, Do Yongguan was mercilessly kicked out of the sect. Zhang Su's disciple, who was saved by Do Yongguan, also had a sense of brotherhood. In order to repay Do Yongguan's kindness, he did not hesitate to violate the sect's rules and privately imparted martial arts to Zhang Su. In a fit of rage, Zhang Su expelled him from Lotus Pond. Do Yongguan knelt outside the door and continuously kowtowed for nearly 100 times. In the end, a Grand Master of Huangnan County, who had visited Lotus Pond to compare notes on martial arts with Zhang Su, interceded for him. Zhang Su reluctantly accepted him as an outer sect disciple. Jianghu was like this. Without rules, nothing could be accomplished. This was also the reason why so many nameless people racked their brains to become disciples of the gangs. Whether or not there was a master leading the way was of utmost importance. Even with the same aptitude, there would be a world of difference in cultivation level after a few years. On the roof of a side house, there were two young men drinking wine and admiring the moon. One of them was dressed shabbily and sat there drinking slowly. The other was dressed in bright clothes and had a handsome appearance. He had sharp eyebrows and all the items on him were the most fashionable and expensive items in Nam County. He was lying on the roof, shaking a small vermilion-colored porcelain wine pot. The wine was green ant wine. However, after changing to this gourd-shaped wine pot, the price was not much lower than white dragon wine. When the handsome man was not smiling, he had the demeanor of an aristocratic family. However, once he smiled, he exposed himself. He laughed and said, "Brother Yen, I really didn't expect that I would be able to drink 6 taels of silver a pot of wine one day." The shabbily dressed man with the surname Yen turned his head and laughed softly. "In the future, even if it's 60 taels of silver a pot, you can still afford it. Listen to Brother Yen, it will be difficult for you to find a woman as good as Miss Song in your lifetime. Don't take it lightly." The handsome man who was about to become an inner disciple of Lotus Pond smiled and said, "Brother Yen, in terms of martial arts, I will never be as good as you in this lifetime. However, when it comes to dealing with women, especially those rich young ladies, you are far inferior to me." The shabbily dressed man sitting and drinking wine shook his head and laughed. "Yongguan, your talent in martial arts is not inferior to mine. Although you have missed the best time to temper your body, Master is a dual cultivator with unfathomable inner strength. As long as you are promoted from an inner disciple to a direct disciple, your future will be limitless. Even if Miss Song is the daughter of the governor, you will be worthy of her. Yongguan, don't despise Brother Yen for being rigid. When you meet a good girl, no matter how much she can't bear to part with you, as a responsible man, you have to make her proud of you. You can't always think that she's such a high and mighty girl who's only obedient to you and only cares about ordering her around like a cow or horse. You've gained face in front of your fellow disciples, but later on, you've become a family with her." Do Yongguan's face suddenly turned gloomy. "Brother Yen, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have been," the shabbily dressed man said magnanimously. "It's all fate. Moreover, Yen Shijun doesn't regret it. I was adopted by Master when I was young. After following Master for so many years, from Fengyang County to Nam County, I have only learned Master's stubbornness. Eldest martial brother has the best perseverance and learned martial arts from Master. Second martial brother has the best talent. Even if he doesn't practice martial arts diligently, his martial arts didn't fall behind. Moreover, when he was with the governor, he was smooth and slick. In all aspects, it was thanks to second martial brother's connections that our Lotus Pond was able to expand in Nam County. However, in many things, it is difficult to have the best of both worlds. No matter how you choose, you will not live happily. I also don't know if entering Lotus Pond will help you or harm you. You may find out in the future. However, I hope that you don't know. When you become the son-in-law of the governor, don't mix in Jianghu anymore. You won't be able to make a name for yourself. If you mix in the government or the military, you will have a better future than in our line of work." Do Yongguan was speechless. He sat up and saw a few outer disciples of Fish Pond patrolling near the martial arts field at night. He was somewhat dispirited. Do Yongguan suddenly opened his eyes wide and completely sobered up. Groups of black-armored men climbed over the wall in an orderly manner. After landing on the ground, they bent their backs and sprinted forward. They raised their short crossbows and shot, killing the sentries in front of them like the autumn wind sweeping away leaves. Almost all of the patrolling disciples at the Lotus Pond had their heads pierced by more than 2 crossbow bolts to ensure that they died silently and without any struggle before they died. Apart from the north, the black-armored assassins gradually approached the residents north of the martial arts field from the east, west, and south. What followed was an even more sinister night attack. When Yen Shijun and Do Yongguan stood up and saw the general situation, Yen Shijun immediately shouted, "Assassins are attacking!" Do Yongguan was in a daze. He was about to turn around and ask Yen Shijun what kind of enemy Lien Tang had provoked for them to be so ruthless. However, when he turned around, he heard the soft whooshing sound of arrows piercing through the air. Then, he saw a bloody scene. Yen Shijun, who had just warned, had just dodged the attack of a featherless arrow when a second featherless arrow circled in a large arc and pierced through his abdomen from the side. Yan Shijun staggered back, but another arrow came straight at him. Other than the second arrow, which was especially domineering, which he could not dodge, the other two arrows were easy to dodge. Yan Shijun turned his head, grabbed the arrow with one hand, and held it upside down. With all his strength he said, "It's the Northern Liang crossbowman." As soon as he finished speaking, a burly assassin in black armor easily climbed up the building. He looked a little annoyed at Yan Shijun for being a busybody on the roof. He held a crossbow in one hand and a saber in the other as he slashed at Yan Shijun. Do Yongguan had never experienced a life-or-death battle like this before. Although there were fights between gangs in the past where people killed each other and blood splattered everywhere, Do Yongguan was still able to fight back. In the end, it was far less terrifying and cruel than tonight's sneak attack. Not to mention that Do Yongguan had become a spectator. Even Yan Shijun, who was a first-class expert in his eyes, had his arm and shoulder chopped off by that saber. The burly man in black armor had just slashed down with his saber when he suddenly raised his arm and shot a powerful crossbow at Do Yongguan. Do Yongguan's life wasn't meant to end yet. At this moment, he was unexpectedly lucky and dodged the crossbow. He stepped through the roof tiles and landed in the martial arts room. He casually picked up a saber and retreated. Do Yongguan relied on his familiarity with the terrain to move around desperately. Every time he moved, there would be crossbow bolts falling from the roof like a shadow. The black-armored assassin softly exclaimed in surprise. He obviously didn't expect this kid to be so agile. Just as he was about to jump into the room to chase after him, another man in the same armor jumped onto the roof. He held an oxhorn longbow and shot an arrow at a house that suddenly lit up. The window was broken and the owner of the house was nailed to the wall by an arrow just as he lit up the lantern. The man with astonishing archery skills coldly said, "Tonight, we will only catch the big fish. I will stand guard here. You go downstairs. If you lose to those fledgling eagles from Wutong Garden, you know the consequences." A hint of fear appeared in the eyes of the burly armored soldier. He hurriedly acknowledged the order and ran forward. Like a forest spirit ape, he jumped down from the roof and joined up with the other soldiers. They quickly moved forward and headed straight for the main residence. That was the courtyard where Zhang Su of Lotus Pond was located. The armored soldiers charged forward with an irresistible force. The outer disciples who were not skilled enough would only end up being cut down like rice. Some of the inner disciples were not completely unable to fight, but this group of armored soldiers did not pay attention to any of the Zhonghu rules of killing. In a small area of close combat, in the blink of an eye, they had the advantage of numbers. 2 or 3 cold sabers charged forward, supplemented by the sinister sneak attacks of the short crossbows, and the sturdy soft armor covering their bodies. The weapons and instruments of the Zhonghu gangs could not be considered very sharp. As long as it was not a fatal injury, these armored soldiers would not pay attention to it. They would allow you to stab with a sword or 2 sabers, and they would take the opportunity to heavily injure or even kill the Lotus Pond disciples on the other side. It should be known that the peregrine falcon was originally an expert from all kinds of places in the Liang Zhonghu. When it came to one-on-one combat, he was an expert. Over the years, he had become proficient in many military formations and had become a pack of jackals and wolves. Compared to a one-on-one assassination, the lethality of the attack naturally could not be mentioned in the same breath. The archer who gave the order on the roof had a cold look in his eyes. He took out a refined arrow from the quiver on his back. Huangnam County's number 1, shrew monkey, Zhang Su could be considered a troublesome character who was on par with the prince's retainer Lu Qiantang. This time, the peregrine falcon and the eagle guard were traveling together. If they could take this person's head, it would undoubtedly be a great achievement. Ren Shanyu's body floated down. It was unknown whether she was alive or dead. Su Fengnian's eyes were calm. The peregrine falcon? Then he said, "That guy should be the big fish that was caught by the Han Shang." Su Yambing nodded. Then Chao Zhuan and Snowsuit found that only the gray-haired young master was left in the room. In Shiitake Inn, the rich old master who had succeeded in one strike was about to leave quietly. Then he died quietly. The old man did not even know how he died and who killed him. Chapter 9:14. Ren Shanyu fell on the street, but Su Fengnian did not show up immediately. He counted to 16 in his heart, but still, no one showed up. From Su Fengnian's perspective, he could clearly see that Ren Shanyu struggled a few times. It was impossible for her to even sit up, let alone stand up. Just as Su Fengnian was about to take action, someone from Shiitake Inn finally rushed out of the embroidery house, picked up Ren Shanyu, and disappeared into the alley. It was Hong Shuwen, who was neither an eagle guard nor a peregrine falcon. Su Fengnian's face was clouded. Su Yanbing, who came and went like a ghost, stood back at the window and nodded to Su Fengnian, indicating that Shiitake Inn had been dealt with. Su Fengnian turned his head, and his expression returned to normal. He asked Chao Zhuan for the detailed location of Wang Yunshu's family mansion, and then asked Snowsuit for the broken zither that was made for flying swords. He held the vase of flower gall with the sound of bells under his arm, and did not say much to Chao Zhuan and Snowsuit. He told them not to see him off, and just smiled at them, which made the two brothel girls feel flattered. The usually smooth and slick little shopkeeper of Peach Cheek Brothel did not dare to draw legs on a snake. She stood in the corridor and watched the two people disappear around the corner. She noticed the side profile of the gray-haired young man, which was angular. She did not know if it was an illusion, but the young man had a kind of spirit that could make Huangnam County feel like a storm was coming. Chao Zhuan waited for him to leave and leaned against the porch. She turned her head and saw that Snowsuit clearly wanted to take another look, but she was shy. Chao Zhuan could not help but laugh at her, and pointed to the window to Snowsuit. The latter was stunned, and then immediately understood. She quickly lifted her skirt and ran to the window. Chao Gu didn't do anything superfluous. She looked at Shui Yi's back. Mother always disliked this girl for not being feminine enough. She couldn't learn how to seduce men, so why didn't she come out? Chao Zhuan collected her thoughts and began to think about the appearance of the young master of Lingzhou. Would the Peach Cheek Brothel, which had always been suppressed by Shiitake Inn, have a turn for the better? As for the broken zither and the vase that she did not know whether it was genuine or fake, they were all insignificant small things. As long as that person was willing, even if it was a girl like Snowsuit in Peach Cheek Brothel, as long as there was one, Peach Cheek Brothel would give it to him. Outside the building, Su Fengnian boarded a carriage while Su Yanbing drove the carriage to Wang Gongcao's residence in the county. Wang Shihua was the current head of the Wang family of the water school. Following the rise of his mortal enemy, Li Gongda, to the rank of second-rank Dao administrator of Bailiang, Long Yi's Wang family was known as the dragon raises its head, arrogant and despotic. The Wang family of Zijin, who had always been on good terms with Long Yi, could no longer tolerate him. The Wang family of the water school took the opportunity to rope him in. With the addition of the Ling Su of Gojoseon, the three families with the same surname had secretly joined forces to contend against Long Yi. With Wang Shihua, who had great accomplishments and knowledge, as the leader, Wang Shihua's days were not as difficult as outsiders imagined. For the past few years, the Wang family's residence had been bustling with people and carriages. Even a few scholars who had recently entered Bailiang had come to seek guidance from this great scholar of exegesis. However, it was still uncommon for a carriage to visit in the middle of the night. Although Wang Yunshu had a notorious reputation in Huangnam County for not teaching him strictly, the gatekeeper of the Wang family's residence was someone with hidden authority who was no less than a 7th or 8th ranked official. If he was the slightest bit careless in his treatment of others, he would be severely reprimanded or even expelled from the residence. Thus, when he saw an unfamiliar young master step down from the carriage, the gatekeeper hurriedly walked out from the side door and walked down the steps to inquire about the matter. However, what surprised the gatekeeper was that this young man was completely different from the other aristocratic sons who were eager to open the E-gate to welcome them grandly. He actually said that it was fine to wait at the entrance. The gatekeeper immediately understood that he was most likely looking for the eldest young master. In Huangnam County, it was more effective to look for the eldest young master than to look for anyone else. The eldest young master was extremely influential in Huangnam County. Not long ago, an elder of the Ling Su of Gojoseon had hidden a mistress in a golden house and was blocked by a shrew at the entrance. His disgraceful behavior was completely exposed. It was only when the eldest young master stepped forward that the matter was resolved. Since he wasn't here to compare notes with his master, he was most likely a good-for-nothing playboy. The gatekeeper subconsciously looked down on him, saving him some polite greetings. Walking back to the side door, he looked back and saw the young man squatting on the steps next to the stone lion. The gatekeeper couldn't help but think that this young master must have encountered a threshold that he couldn't pass. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used the stupidest method to wait for the eldest young master. In the middle of winter, which young master wouldn't be enjoying wine and beauties? The gatekeeper glanced at the burly man standing at the bottom of the steps. It was a pity that such an extraordinary retainer had met the wrong person and followed the wrong master. Su Yanbing hesitated for a moment. Squatting on the steps one step lower than Su Fengnian's, in the eyes of others, he was overstepping his boundaries. In the cold weather, Su Fengnian put his hands in his sleeves and laughed softly. I've implicated Uncle Su. Originally, I could have introduced myself and then asked Wang Gongchao for a few cups of hot tea to warm my stomach. But since I'm going to put on a show, I have to put on a good show. Otherwise, I'll have to leave tomorrow morning. The water classic Wang family won't be able to understand the sincerity of a Lingzhou general. Su Yanbing raised his head to look at the sky. You need a heavy snowfall? It seems more sincere. Su Fengnian said in surprise. That's possible? Su Yanbing smiled slightly and said, when I was young, I traveled extensively. My luck wasn't bad and I met some hidden experts. I learned a lot of unorthodox methods. Now that my realm is high enough, I think the heavens will give me face if I ask for a snowstorm in the middle of winter. Su Fengnian asked curiously, does Master Lu Hao have the ability to do so? Su Yanbing thought for a moment and said calmly, that old thief probably can't. It doesn't mean that my realm is higher than Master Lu Hao's. This is probably the principle of specialization in learning. Back then, I went to the South Sea and killed a bunch of qi cultivators. I obtained a few secret manuals. But when it comes to killing people, two Master Lu Hao's won't be of much help. All these years, I heard that Dong Tai is the best in the world when it comes to killing people. I've always wanted to learn from that peach blossom sword deity. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, Li Chungang reached the heavenly phenomenon state before the age of 30. There's also Dong Tai and Uncle Su. All of you seem to have a smooth journey in martial arts. How did you do it? Su Yanbing thought about this question very seriously. Finally, he gave Su Fengnian an answer that made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Just go with the flow. As if he found Su Fengnian's expression funny, Su Yanbing said something that was very suitable for the current weather. Actually, Su Yanbing has always felt that his achievements today are because of this handsome face that didn't lose to His Highness when he was young. Su Fengnian held his belly and laughed. After he stopped laughing, he said helplessly, Uncle Su, you and second brother Yuan will definitely get along. Su Yanbing smiled indifferently and said, that blockhead on horseback spear and lance was indeed taught by me. Su Fengnian was speechless. Chapter 9:15. Su Yanbing suddenly asked, does your highness not know that Yuan Zuozong started practicing blade techniques at the age of 21? However, after losing to Gu Jiantang, he stopped showing off his blade techniques in front of the world. In the ranking of the experts in the Liyang army, Beiliang had Chen Jibao and Yuan Zuozong. Now, if Gu Jiantang only had the Thunder Heart, he would probably be at the bottom. However, Gu Jiantang is a cunning person. After so many years, he shouldn't be stagnant. Your Highness, if you still have thoughts about martial arts, why don't you listen to Su Yanbing? Pick two masters who haven't entered the first grade and let them fight willingly. It's a life and death battle. That's why you shouldn't enter the first grade. No matter if it's the first grade or the first grade, as long as you see the greatness of the first grade, your spirit will be more or less affected. Su Fengnian nodded and said, I understand. This is like Administrator Li Gongda. He stands high and sees far. He knows the dangers of fighting in the imperial court, so he acts submissively and can't help but be high-spirited. On the contrary, it was those who were in charge of small counties and counties, who claimed to be the overlords of their own land, who were full of spirit. According to what Uncle Su said, it's easy for second-grade masters to fight to their heart's content. Su Yanbing stopped talking and didn't say anything more. About 2 hours later, the sound of horse hooves hitting the street was especially ear-piercing in the cold winter night. Su Fengnian turned his head and saw a group of cavalrymen galloping towards them. 2 cavalrymen were riding side by side. Even though they were galloping at full speed, the cavalrymen were still able to converse with each other in a soft voice. Their faces were dignified, but they were also forcefully restraining their pleasant surprise. One of the cavalrymen was not wearing armor. Su Fengnian saw this scene and laughed at himself. The ability to hide one's own weakness was not unique to Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian was still squatting in the shadow of the stone lion, shielding himself from the wind and cold. Su Yanbing had already returned to the bottom of the steps. Wang Yunshu urged his horse to gallop. He looked a little tired, but he was more excited. When he saw Su Yanbing's figure, his expression froze. Then, He lashed the horse's buttocks fiercely. He almost rolled off the horse. Just as he was about to kneel, Su Fengnian waved his hand and said, "Forget it. Tell me what happened." Wang Yunshu jogged to the bottom of the steps and asked cautiously, "Shall we enter the mansion and tell His Highness in detail?" Su Fengnian pointed to the seat beside him and shook his head. "I'm going back now. Just give me a rough idea." Wang Gongcao's adopted son, Jiao Wui, ordered the other 20 or so knights to stop a little further away. He got off his horse and knelt on one knee. He cupped his fist and said in a deep voice, "Huangnam County's County Commandant Jiao Wui greets His Royal Highness." Su Fengnian smiled. "County Commandant Jiao, please stand up and speak." Wang Yunshu walked up the steps and squatted down beside Su Fengnian. He began to report to His Royal Highness about the situation of the battle. His sworn brother had gone to Qingrong Temple and coincidentally met a Taoist priest and 2 highly skilled Taoists about 3 li away from Qingrong Temple. They said that they were there to welcome back a few disciples who had obtained crowns and headscarves from other temples. Originally, Jiao Wui would not be too concerned about this. Those middle-aged Taoists were real Taoists from the #1 temple in Huangnam County. Perhaps they would even greet him with a smile. However, Jiao Wui's purpose for going to Qingrong Temple this time was to obtain riches and honor. Without a second word, he wanted to capture the 3 people. At first, the 3 Taoists surrendered and did not resist. However, when the scouts under his command returned and reported that there were Taoists who had sneakily escaped, there were already 30 light armored cavalry who went to pursue them. The 3 Taoists immediately revealed their ferocity. Luckily, after Jiao Wui had split half of his troops to Wang Yunshu, the 3 Taoists were still in sync with each other. Apart from the dozen or so hidden scouts, each of them had 60 riders a li away. When the 3 Taoists saw that Jiao Wui only had 50 soldiers around him, they vowed to fight to the death. However, they did not expect that after the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, the next wave of cavalry would swiftly arrive. There were also scouts who secretly sent a message that the 3rd wave of cavalry did not charge forward. Instead, they dismounted from their horses and surrounded them. Out of the 3 Taoists from Qingrong Temple, 2 died and 1 was injured. Unfortunately, the 2 crowns and headscarves were nowhere to be found. On the other hand, Wang Yunshu's side was much more relaxed. He had purely gone to watch the show and had even missed it. The leader of the Eagle Guard had confirmed that Wang Yunshu was His Royal Highness' trusted aide. Only then did he not give Wang Yunshu the cold shoulder and tell him a few things. Only then did Wang Yunshu know that the 143 people in Lotus Pond, regardless of whether they were women, children, old or young, were all killed to the point that they could not be more dead. It could be said that their entire families had been completely wiped out. Even Huangnam County's #1 expert, Zhang Su, was not spared. Wang Yunshu had also gone to help clean up the mess while he was at it. Zhang Su, who had been famous in Lingzhou for a long time, had died so miserably. Wang Yunshu had nothing to do, so he went to count the corpse that had its head cut off and nailed to a thick pillar. The headless corpse did not have any light injuries. There were 6 places that had serious injuries. Both of its arms had been chopped off at the shoulders, and an arrow had pierced through its chest. The rest of the corpses were strewn all over the floor, and most of them were badly mutilated. Wang Yunshu had vomited out all the delicacies and wine he had eaten that day. Even now, his scalp was still somewhat numb. In the past, he had always felt that he did not treat people as people. Only today did he realize that once he provoked the Bailiang peregrine falcons, human lives were truly worthless. Su Fengnian quietly listened to Wang Yunshu finish speaking. He stood up and said with a smile, "After all, Huangnam County is your territory, so you should be more familiar with it. There are still some things left to clean up. If I need to trouble you and Commandant Jiao, I will send someone to your residence to inform you." Wang Yunshu was extremely happy. Jiao Wui bowed and cupped his fists. "This is my duty. I will not regret it even if I have to die for your highness." Su Fengnian walked down the steps. Wang Yunshu asked in a low voice, "Is your highness really not going to stay in my humble abode? Even if it's just a cup of hot wine?" Su Fengnian teased, "All right, you flattered me enough for tonight. Wang Yunshu, after you return home, tell Wang Gongchao that if you have the chance to go to Liangzhou, come to my residence for a chat." Wang Yunshu said in fear and trepidation, Of course. Su Fengnian turned to Jiao Wui and said, "Commandant Jiao, You're quite experienced in managing the army. After the Huangnam County incident, the Lingzhou General's residence is still lacking a commandant. After the new year, bring your original troops over. I'll give you another 600 soldiers and horses. We have to make up a total of 1,000. Jiao Wui, who was nearing 40 and had finally abruptly become rich, had tears in his eyes. He fell to his knees. Jiao Wui is willing to die for your highness. Su Fengnian patted his shoulder and walked towards the carriage. Wang Yunshu wanted to send him off, but Su Fengnian, who had his back to the residence, waved his hand. Wang Yunshu watched the carriage disappear into the distance. He retracted his gaze and said softly, "Brother, His Highness has gone far." Jiao Wui, however, kept his hands pressed against the ground. He was unwilling to get up. Wang Yunshu turned his head and glanced at the beautiful plaque that the imperial court had bestowed upon him 200 years ago. "Brother, please don't forget about our Wang family in the future."